Mr. Mayor. We are now live. I apologize for the delay. We had a problem with the Zoom link.
Okay.
And I believe we can see that Councilmember Reynolds, Jacobson, and Deputy Mayor Weicker are here, but we're not seeing you on camera. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Great.
So go ahead and start. Okay.
Yes, please.
Good evening and welcome to the May 18, 2021 City Council special video meeting. Apologies for the late start. We had some technical difficulties. I'm Mayor Benson Wong. Tonight's virtual City Council meeting is being brought to you using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. We're also broadcasting live on MITV channel 21 and on the city's YouTube channel. Our city manager, Jesse Vaughn, and other staff members will be participating in tonight's meeting in the City Council chambers and maintaining the recommended social distance. Other staff members will be participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Public audience members are listening to the meeting by telephone or using the Zoom teleconferencing application. Welcome to all you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Before this meeting, the City Council was in executive session from 4 p.m. to 6:15 p.m. to discuss with legal counsel pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 paren 1 close paren small I close paren litigation or potential litigation to which the city is or is likely to become a party. No action was taken. Council members, please have your microphone turned on whenever the city clerk, Deb Estrada, conducts a roll call during tonight's meeting. City clerk will be conducting these roll calls to make sure that we accurately capture your vote. City clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and my apologies to everyone listening. I apparently copied the wrong link into the agenda, so hopefully everybody will be understanding. Okay. Mayor Wong.
Here.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Here.
Councilmember Anderall.
Here.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Here.
Councilmember Neese.
Here.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Here.
And Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Here.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Great, thank you. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Council to ensure that only the U.S. flag is visible. Please consider turning off your video camera or stepping out of the view of your camera. And I'm gonna ask you to please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge the allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We now move to our first item of business, which is to approve the agenda. Council, are there any questions about the agenda? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Neese and seconded by Councilmember Reynolds to approve the agenda. City Clerk, please conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson. Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderall.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
And Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Motion passes and the agenda is approved. For this meeting, we continue to utilize the Zoom platform. I'll do my best to recognize you in the order that you raise your hands. After being recognized, you may then ask your question. As previously mentioned in earlier meetings, if you can try to limit yourself to one question, a clarifying question, that'd be great in order to allow all council members to have an opportunity to ask a question before the next round of questioning by council members. Next up on the agenda, we have the city manager's report. And for that, we welcome, of course, City Manager Jesse Vaughn.
Good evening, council. Just one moment, please. Let's see. There we go. All right, let's get started since we are a little behind schedule. First of all, it's really been a couple of big news weeks regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. So let me begin by reminding everyone that if you are age 12 and older now, you are eligible for the Pfizer vaccine. Just a couple weeks ago, emergency use was approved from the Food and Drug Administration that expanded the Pfizer vaccine to youth 12 years and older. I know this past weekend, the Mercer Island School District did an on-site vaccine clinic, and I'm told there will probably be more pop-up clinics to get our youth vaccinated in the coming weeks and certainly months. So more information as we receive it. Just a reminder, we are posting it on our website, and I have the link on the slide there at the bottom. Also some good news, Mercer Island, you are doing an amazing job. We are leading the county, as I understand it, with 90% of our eligible adults having received their first dose. And I heard today, those of us having received our second dose is well over 70%. So keep up the great work. And again, our focus is now shifting to getting our youth age 12 and up vaccinated. Gosh, masks. We've had some conflicting information coming in. Essentially last week, the governor adopted the CDC's updated mask guidance, which essentially said if you're fully vaccinated, you do not need to wear face coverings. That came as a bit of a surprise, I think, to many of us in local government and as well as to some of our public health providers. So that's still all being sorted out. What I am told, City Council, and we don't know what to expect just yet, is that Seattle-King County Public Health is now taking the information from the CDC and the governor's office and will be providing updated mask guidance to us this week. So the city has not issued any information, and we have not changed our operating protocols either until we hear from public health. So more to come. With the governor's orders, he did emphasize that businesses do retain the right to make their own decisions and to require masks in their place of business. And there are some exceptions. So if you're in a healthcare setting, at a correctional facility, a homeless shelter, or schools, masks are still required. And they're also still required on public transportation. So my way of saying we're going to be receiving some more information on this, and we will push it out to the Mercer Island community as soon as we get some clarity from Seattle-King County Public Health. Also, in news last week, the governor announced that pandemic-related restrictions are anticipated to be lifted by June 30th. You've probably seen this out in the media as the state's planning to reopen. So this is based on a number of metrics, and essentially that 70% of people age 16 and over are vaccinated. If the state hits that metric ahead of June 30th, then the indication is that we would actually have those restrictions lifted sooner. And currently, as of the development of this presentation, Washington was at about a 50% vaccination rate. Also, all counties moved to phase 3. This didn't impact us. King County was already in phase 3. We do know, as this is evolving, the local health officials, wow, let me start over. Our local health officials, that word is troubling me tonight, do have the authority to institute local restrictions if it becomes necessary to do so. I don't have any indication except around masks that there's something else coming from Seattle-King County Public Health. The other metric they're keeping an eye on is ICUs. And if they get back to 90% capacity, then there will likely be some adjustments. So again, a lot of information coming at us in less than a week. We're keeping information posted on our website and our Let's Talk page, and the link is there. So the question I've been asked is, what does this mean for city facilities? And I noted in the header here, this is still in development. I just want to remind you where we've come from. In March, we moved to phase 3. We didn't have a lot of notice about that. End of April, we were told we're going back to phase 2. We were planning for that. Surprise, we stayed at phase 3, and it looks like we're headed to have restrictions lifted at the end of June. So that's just my way of saying there's a lot still shifting here. So council, where we're at, the community center is still on track to reopen at the end of June for summer camps. That's been in the works for some time. We are also planning for limited special events for this summer. Stay tuned for more information on that. And then starting to work, actually I shouldn't say starting, we are working on fall planning and beyond into 2022. And largely still following the recreation reset plan that we discussed with you a couple weeks ago. The thrift shop is also now starting to phase back. We are working to begin expanding hours on July 1st and building back the thrift shop over the course of the year. So you're aware that's going forward. City Hall, we have been pointing to September as the date that we would reopen City Hall to the public. And I'm still sticking with that timeline. We have a number of missing pieces of information right now. So what I anticipate is staff will begin phasing back to in-person work at City Hall over July and August. Okay, so that assumes the operating restrictions get lifted in the end of June. And then we're still waiting for more information on things like quarantine protocols. I just dropped that in the slide. The hypothetical is everybody comes back to City Hall and we have a COVID case. What do we do? And my understanding, again, I mentioned this a couple times, is those guidelines are still coming. So we want to understand that before we make that move. But we are still planning to reopen in September unless something changes with the pandemic. City council meetings, we are also, I've mentioned this previously, on track to return to either in-person or a hybrid format by September. In fact, we've done some work in council chambers that's not visible to you that will make that hybrid meeting more practical. Council, we're going to do some behind the scenes testing over the next several weeks. And then we're probably going to do some testing of this in July live, just to make sure it's all working before we put you here back at the dais for a hybrid meeting format. The board and commission meetings are a little more tricky. And you might think, well, if you can do it for the city council, why can't we do it for the boards and commissions? The difference is our broadcasting. I'm not going to get into the details now. It would take me another 20 minutes to explain this, but we may keep our board and commission meetings remote and on a Zoom platform for just a little bit longer, maybe October, so that we can work on that Zoom platform and the technology solutions after we get the city council meetings resolved. More to come, council, community, more to come. We're still working on it. We'll let you know as we learn more from public health. Okay, a snapshot of our upcoming meetings. City Council, your next meeting is Tuesday, June 1st. And on deck for this month, we have a Planning Commission meeting May 19th and a Design Commission meeting May 27th. As a reminder, all of our meetings are updated on our website. Now on to some city service updates, and I do have a handful here. So council, I just want to mention, we have had a string, again, unfortunately, of vehicle prowls. You probably heard about them in social media. So we have not yet identified a suspect or suspects, but we are actively investigating and following up on fraud that took place after the prowls occurred, because there were a number of stolen credit cards that were used immediately after the break-ins happened. What we're doing in terms of policing, again, we've added both high visibility and some less obvious patrols in our neighborhoods. So things like uniformed officers and marked cars are monitoring the parking lots. This is where most of the car prowls happened recently. We also have plainclothes officers out in the community and keep an eye on things as well. We are leaving lock it or lose it flyers on vehicles as a reminder to lock vehicles and keep valuables out of sight. So if you receive something on your car, that's a friendly reminder from our Mercer Island Police Department. Tips for preventing car prowls, just a reminder, lock your vehicles. And that includes your sun, moon roofs and convertible tops. Take your valuables out, make sure you're parking in well-lit areas, set the alarm on your vehicle if you have one. And for everyone else, remember this is a neighborhood crime watch city. So if you see something suspicious, somebody's looking around, peeking in cars, testing door handles, please do call 911 so that we can get somebody out as soon as possible. If you're interested in more information on our crime prevention program, we've got our link posted there. Switching gears somewhat entirely, just a reminder, the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, update process is underway. The comment period is open until June 1st, and council, we will be back to you on June 1st with a follow-up from our previous discussion. As a reminder, this Transportation Improvement Plan identifies all of our capital projects over the next 6 years. It's a rolling planning process. We do the update annually. If you'd like to know more about the TIP, if you'd like to submit comments and feedback, we have a Let's Talk page stood up, and you can provide your comments there and also preview all of the documents. Also from Public Works, just a reminder, it's backflow testing time. If you have backflow assemblies on your property, your test results are due to the city by June 30th. So that date is coming up. This is a requirement of state law. Basically, any high-risk plumbing connection that is tied to the city's drinking water system must be protected by a backflow prevention device and tested annually. So about 1/3 of our service connections in the city are covered by this annual requirement. We did send out letters to everybody that this affects. I think most of our community members are familiar with this because it's an annual requirement. And we've tried to make it simple so you can enter your test results on the city's web portal and then receive a confirmation that we've received your submittal. If you have questions, we have a web link there, and certainly in the letter we just sent out also has contact information for city staff, and we're happy to assist if you run into any challenges in completing these tests. Thrift shop, I briefly touched on this in the earlier part of my presentation. You know, after being largely shut down since last March, we reopened this last summer on a very limited basis. We've had a skeleton staff crew and some mighty volunteers helping us carry the load. Council, at your April 6th meeting, you appropriated $100,000 to get us back up and running. We're working on rebuilding our staff capacity, looking at expanding our operating hours starting in early July. We're also taking this time to take everything we've learned from the closure and all the things we've tried to inform a longer term operating strategy. Building back, you know, the volunteer program, that's a huge component of what makes this such a special operation. And then again, we've had an opportunity to tinker with a lot of things and regarding donation processing. So we're bringing that back, streamlining it. And also looking at where are we going to accept donations going forward. We've been at the community center since last summer, and obviously the community center is getting ready to reopen. So I've already mentioned our next key milestone is working on getting those thrift shop hours expanded by July 1st. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for the incredible community support. Everybody's really linking arms right now and helping us bring this back online. So a couple dates to mention: this Saturday, May 22nd, if you've got donated goods piled up, I'll just remind you that we are still accepting donations at the community center from 10 to 3. It's the same kind of routine we've been doing. Pull in, follow the directional signage, please wear a mask, remember to continue distancing, and please be prepared to unload your car. And we do have an opportunity to help us pre-sort a little bit when you unload your car. So look for the bins and the labels. And we have both staff and volunteers there to assist you. If you miss this opportunity, we still have bins outside of the thrift shop in the community center that will remain available for you to drop off. And just a friendly reminder, if the bin is full, actually the slogan is, if the bin is packed, please come back. We also, Memorial Day weekend, the thrift shop will be closed. Not to worry, we'll be restocking and back open in June, and again, working on expanding our hours. So if you are interested in volunteering, which is really critical to our operation, I'll just remind you to please reach out to Suzanne Fallon, and she's our thrift shop business coordinator. I've shared her phone number and her email address on the slide. Moving on to some other Youth and Family Services Department updates. We have a couple program announcements. BeREAL is a research-based program and study from the University of Washington for child and family well-being for young adults from Mercer Island. This is a young adult program focusing on strengthening skills for well-being, navigating stress, of which I think everyone has a lot right now, and improving academic performance. It's online and it is free. So the first cohort starts May 19th, followed by a second cohort later this summer. I noticed on this slide, we don't specify the ages, so we'll make sure when we push this information out that we're very specific about the age for young adults. If you're interested in more information, we have 2 website links available there. All right, and the Incredible Years Parenting Program. I just spoke with somebody that had been participating in this and they couldn't say enough good things about their experience. So if you're interested, registration is now open for the summer series. This is an evidence-based parenting curriculum for parents of kiddos aged 2 to 6. And allows parents to build new skills to promote children's reading, school readiness, problem solving, social competence, and emotional self-regulation. I can tell you I have a 2.5-year-old and I think I could really benefit from this program. It is also online and free. It begins June 9th. It's from 7 to 8:30 p.m. and it will continue on Wednesday evenings through July 2nd. So again, an online program so you can join from your home. Rachel Montgomery is leading this and her email address is there if you'd like more information or to register. Most Steer Clear, another program highlight. We have a lot going on right now. Mercer Island High School students are going public with why they steer clear of using marijuana, alcohol, and other substances. So this is the high school students collaborating with YFS and our Healthy Youth Initiative, and also our regional prevention partner, Neighborhood House. The Bridge has launched the most Steer Clear campaign highlighting. Sorry, there's a lot of text here. It's importance of staying focused and motivated to reach goals, concerns about the risks of mental health issues. Our huge thanks to Joe Bryant for supporting this program and students Jared, Sophia, Sid, Benjamin, and Eden for creating the campaign. If you'd like to know more about the campaign or listen to the Bridge, we've got the link there on the bottom of the slide. All right, bringing it home here, City Council. Hey, good news, the Mercer Island Farmers Market is back. The season kicks off Sunday, June 6th. That is really great news. It will run through September 26th, and I'm hearing many of our vendors are returning. We'll be in the same location as the year prior, and they're also planning for live music this year. So the market's open 10 to 3. For anyone that's new to the island, it's just adjacent to Mercerdale Park, and I understand live music will be from 11 to 2. So the website information is there, and certainly we'll continue to promote the market as we get up and running and go through the season. Council, you were very well informed of this, but some may not be aware that on May 7th, a couple of Fridays ago, our Mercer Island Fire Department, along with crews from Kirkland, Redmond, Bellevue, Eastside Fire and Rescue, and our Mercer Island Public Works staff successfully extracted a construction worker from a 9-foot deep dirt trench. In the picture here, it's a little hard to see, I'm sure, from the viewers at home. If you see that ladder laying on the ground, the trench is to the right, and the gentleman that was trapped is basically down in that hole adjacent to that foundation. So it was a 4-hour rescue, a very narrow and confined work site. I had an opportunity to visit and meet with interim Fire Chief Jeff Clark. He walked me through the entire operation, which was pretty remarkable. Our incident commander said, hey, we had some of the best technical rescue experts in the western half of the country assisting with this rescue. So I'm really pleased at the outcome. A huge thank you to the many partners that were here and assisting us. And of course, we send our best wishes for a continued recovery to the gentleman that was extracted. So thank you again to everyone who assisted with that rescue. And one final reminder, city facilities will be closed for Memorial Day, which is on Monday, May 31st. So we invite all of our Mercer Islanders to join us in honoring those who have served, especially those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to our nation. And with that, City Council, I will conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Jesse. We now move to the appearances portion of our agenda, where individuals wishing to speak live during the meeting may do so by telephone or by using the Zoom teleconferencing application. Anyone may speak to the City Council on any item. All remarks will be addressed to the council as a whole and not addressed to any individual council member or staff member. If any person makes personal or impertinent or slanderous remarks or becomes boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the council, I may request that the person leave the meeting. When it is your turn to address the council, be sure to speak audibly and state your name for the record. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. A 3-minute timer will be visible on your computer screen. City Clerk, has anybody signed up to speak before the council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 2 individuals signed up this evening, and the first person up is Ms. Addie Smith.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. The police chief and Mercer Island Police report to the city manager, who spoke from the city manager's report just a few seconds ago. My name is Addie Smith. I am a hate crime survivor. My daughter and I were stalked, harassed, threatened, and attacked by white people right here on Mercer Island. The same thing has happened to 2 other Black women since it initially began happening to us here in 2019. The Mercer Island Police refused to write police reports for all of us. The FBI must investigate the city of Mercer Island. I'd like to read some excerpts to the board. It's a continuation of what I was trying to read from the last board meeting. I've tried to keep it as brief as possible, but please extend the courtesy to me that you extended to the gentleman who spoke after me at the last city council meeting. First, I'll finish the school news story from Mercer Island High School students from their student news. It's called 21 Years of Service. Kelly John Lewis finally speaks up about racism at Mercer Island High School. It was written by the managing editor and editor-in-chief in 2020. While Mercer Island School District says it fosters diversity, equity, and inclusion, Kelly John Lewis says these values were never extended to him. Quote, in 21 years, no one has ever asked what it's like being here. I think it's time for me to speak up, end quote. Stephanie John Lewis has taught 3rd grade at Island Park Elementary School for 27 years. As a white mother raising mixed race children, she said that she can understand what it's like to raise children of color in a predominantly white community. As a side note, speaking from my experience, I wonder if white grown-ups ever followed her children and asked them what kind of N-word they are, like the white people here did my biracial daughter, who's half Korean. Anyway, continuing from the article, Stephanie John Lewis said, I love this district, but there's no diversity for my children. They've never had a Black teacher. Craig Olson, former associate principal who retired in 2013, states, quote, I'm sorry that he's in a position where he feels he is under the microscope. He certainly is. Because of his role, his size, and his race, right or wrong, that's the way it is, end quote. Side note, some people have an excuse for disgusting low-class racism, discrimination, and hate to preserve the way it is. I see that a lot here. Former principal Vicki Puckett recalled how the community's ignorance about race influenced a reaction to an incident when flyers stating, quote, it's okay to be white, end quote, were posted around the school. She said that after these were taken down, she received complaints from the community members about their removal. She stated, quote, we have some interesting experiences from the adults in our community who said, we're fine. Why are you spending all this time on diversity and equity, end quote. Puckett and former associate principal Henderson Carlisle both resigned. Puckett also stated, quote, the challenge is that people make assumptions about our African-American population. Oh, they come from the ghetto. They come from downtown Seattle. They don't have any money. They're poor, end quote. Mike Radow, thankfully, is a retired Mercer Island High School teacher. He stated, quote, "We can get a lot of diverse people in these buildings, but we're still going to do things the way we do things. Everyone else has to accommodate to the dominant way," end quote. I'm almost done. Puckett stated, quote, "In this high school, when I first got here, I was taken aback that the students of color were just blending in with the woodwork and they really didn't feel like they had a voice." As a side note, and from my experience, Mike Radow's statements, although racist, is exactly how the city of Mercer Island is running its city hall, police department, and municipal court. It's disgusting, systemically racist, broken, and pathetic. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next and final speaker is Mr. John Hema.
Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, John, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. And Jesse Bond, I know you mentioned you had a 2.5-year-old. My 2.5-year-old granddaughter just left. I was hoping that I could get her to come on and say that she wants to start using Mercer Dale Park Playground again because she lives only 2.5 blocks away. And she is very excited about the new Mercer Island, the new playground equipment, as is her brother, my grandson Ford, who is in a wheelchair. And I wanted to thank all of you, city staff and council members and all others who have been involved in our coalition's effort to make sure that the new playground equipment and the new playground is accessible, inclusive, and equal access to all those of all abilities of whatever age, not just disabled kids, but all kids, and also aging grandparents like me, who need to be able to navigate the playgrounds when we have our grandchildren with us. So I wanted to thank you, and looking forward to seeing the new design. I know you've spent a lot of time on it. We haven't seen the final design yet, but we're very pleased by what we've seen so far. And our coalition, with working together with the Mercer Island Preschool Association, as you know, we're prepared to help raise additional funds if you need them. We haven't seen the final budget yet. I saw a number in the agenda, and maybe, gosh, if the city can pay for the whole thing, terrific. But if you need some additional funds, my Rotary Club, Mercer Island Rotary Club, is going to kick in some money, as is MIPA. And we understand there are benches that would be available with plaques with donors' names. Anyway, we want to help any way we can. So that's really all I wanted to say. That we've been very pleased. Our group who've been working on this, the response has been great. I want to give kudos to Paul West, Jason Kintner, Ryan Daly, Chris McGarvey, all the others, the staff and the city council people, plus the Parks Commission, the Parks and Recreation Commission, have been terrific on this. So, I'll end it there. We look forward to seeing the final Mercer Island Park Playground design. Thanks for your good work. As I've said in a few comments, Let's Talk and other places, this is what democracy looks like. This is what citizens and local government can do if we work together, listen to each other, set goals, and work for the best for all. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item of business is approval of the consent calendar. Consent calendar contains approval of the accounts payable reports for the periods ending April 30 and May 7, certification of payroll dated May 7, approval of minutes of the April 27, 2021 City Council planning session, AB 5871, which is the 2021 East Mercer Way emergency roadway repair, AB 5869, city facility security upgrades, AB 5877, the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month Proclamation number 271. Does anybody wish to pull an item off the consent calendar? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Jacobson and seconded by Councilmember Rosenbaum to approve the consent calendar. City Clerk, please conduct the roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Anderl,
Aye.
Councilmember Neese,
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum,
Aye.
Mayor Wong,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Weicker,
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds,
Aye.
and Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes and the consent calendar as presented is approved. Excuse me. We now move to the first item of regular business, which is number 7 on your agenda. This is Agenda Bill 5872, scoping session on the town center parking study. No formal action by the council is requested. Instead, council is being asked to provide input to help staff develop the scope of the study. And for this, we welcome Jeff Thomas, our interim CPD director, Jason Kittner, Chief of Operations, Ed Holmes, Mercer Island Police Chief, and Sarah Bluvis, Economic Development Coordinator. Jeff, I'm not sure who's going to lead off the discussion. I see Sarah is on the screen, so maybe Sarah, are you going to take it away?
It is. So good evening, council. I am going to be guiding the discussion tonight to kick off the scoping for the parking study for Town Center. But as Mayor Wong mentioned, Jeff Thomas, Jason Kittner, and Chief Ed Holmes are also here tonight. So if any questions come up or they need to present insight that I can't necessarily provide, they are here to help us. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see, do you see my presentation? Fantastic. All right, well, we are here tonight to kick off the scoping discussion for the new town center parking study. This is really going to be a dialogue tonight, so there will be several times where I kind of pause to ask questions about different areas that could be included within this discussion. Of course, if you have questions or need clarification, please raise your hand and let me know. But there will be a lot of opportunity to engage you all in conversation, and I hope that we hear more from you tonight than you do from me. So, let's see if we can get going. There we go. Okay. So first and foremost, we wanted to address the why we're here tonight with the new parking study. Last year in 2020, City Council shared interest in addressing issues and concerns related to town center parking, and in light of the forthcoming light rail station opening in 2023. The study was proposed in the 2021-2022 work plan and was subsequently budgeted during your biennium budget process. So here we are tonight to scope the project. And for our agenda, as Mayor Wong mentioned at the top of this, we don't have any specific actions. Really, we're seeking direction on City Council's priorities for this study. So we'll go through a variety of areas of analysis that could be included, as well as provide opportunity to hear other key concerns you may have about parking in the town center and adjacent areas. We'll touch on the desired deliverables you're hoping to get out of this new parking study, and then before we close it out, I hope to hear a little more about your expectations for the community engagement and public process for this. So first to start, this is a new parking study. There are other studies that have been conducted in the last couple of decades. In your agenda packet, you had links to 2 of those studies. The 2008 study, which is fairly dated at this point. It was conducted by KPG and only assessed on-street parking supply and demand in the town center. We did not include the 2015 parking study in your packet, in part because it was really only related to identifying the feasibility of potential commuter parking facilities within town center. But that was another study more recently conducted, as well as the 2016 study conducted by BERC, which was completed as part of the 2014-2016 town center visioning process. And that was really, I think, the most comprehensive parking study that has been conducted in the last decade. And I mentioned these studies not to say that we've already covered everything that we need to cover when it comes to town center parking, but just as a reminder that there is some historical context for work that's already been completed within this realm. And some of these studies can provide at least a starting point for this discussion. In particular, the 2016 study really included a look at on-street and off-street parking available in the town center area. This map that you see on the left kind of shows the boundaries that were included in that study and the variety of what I will call parking supply options that are included in the town center. The parking inventory that was conducted in 2016, you can see the numbers here, showed both on-street and off-street non-residential. I just give this to you right now, sort of a landscape to let you know kind of what's available at this point. Doing a parking inventory as part of this new study is definitely something that we can undertake within the scope of this project. And it's likely something that we as staff recommend, in part because some parking areas have come online since the 2016 study was completed, so may not have been accurately reflected in that inventory. So this matrix was included in your agenda packet. And again, it's a way to sort of start demonstrating what we've covered in past studies and use it as an opportunity to start this discussion. I won't go through all of these since it was included in your packet, but I did want to throw this up there to see if there were any questions about these different areas of analysis. We will go through each of them in some capacity. I have about 5 slides that will guide this discussion and cluster some of these areas just to kind of smooth out the conversation and make things go more efficiently. But if there's anything on this list right now that you need clarification about, have questions, may not understand what the terms are, please let me know now so we can make sure we're all on the same page as we start this discussion.
I don't see anybody's hand raised right now.
Okay, terrific. Well, let's get into it. So I've got 5 slides tonight that will discuss different areas and then an opportunity to maybe address what we've missed through this discussion. Each slide has some questions posed on it, and I'm really hoping to get a better sense of your priorities as well as what you really hope to see from this study. What specific deliverables are you looking for, and kind of what are your hopes and dreams out of this study? So the first big question is what geographic area should we analyze within this study? The 2 maps on here aren't perfect, but they do show a couple of different areas that we could evaluate. On the left is essentially just town center boundary, connecting from north-south I-90 to southeast 32nd Street, and then from east-west from about 74th Avenue to Island Crest Way. And that was about the geographic region that was covered in the most recent parking study. On the right, it expands the area a bit, including north of town center and south of town center. And we provide this as an area for thought with the thinking that, you know, anything we may do within town center related to parking may impact the surrounding neighborhoods. So it might make sense to include some of those surrounding neighborhoods in this study to make sure that we are really covering kind of as much as we can. So with that, I will turn it over to you all and just again pose the question, what geographic region do you think we should analyze within this study?
Does any council member have an opinion? I'm sure you folks all do. So somebody want to raise their hand? Okay, Councilmember Andral and then Councilmember Neese.
Hey, yeah, if you, just a couple of sentences on how much an expanded scope is going to affect the cost and the amount of time that's spent on the study, and whether there are, other than, what we do in town center may affect north and south. Are there strong pros or cons to doing a more focused study or the broader study?
So I think what I would say, and maybe if Jason or Jeff have feedback on this as well, I would say that for the purposes of this discussion, we're really just trying to capture the extensive list of what you all would like to cover. And then that ultimately will dictate the scope and potential need for, budget appropriation beyond what we've already budgeted for this study. The timing of the study will also be contingent on the scope. There may be possibility to phase it out. So, if there are pieces that rise to priority that you really would hope to accomplish sooner rather than later, we could possibly do a phased approach and work with the consultant in the final project scoping process to figure that out.
Sarah, if I could jump in, just Councilmember Andral, just to answer your question really directly. Obviously, if we include the town center plus the area north of town center, that there's going to be additional cost. I would assume, however, that at least in terms of the permit work that we need to do as part of the study, we most definitely want to pick up the north side because, or excuse me, the area north of town center, because we already have permit parking there. One of the things that's come up is, do we need to go further than that? For example, the neighborhood south of Mercer Dale Park, do we think that there's going to be pressure on that neighborhood? And if we do you want to expand that direction? So that's, kind of shooting from the hip to say yes. There will be additional costs, obviously, if we pick up the broader area. And is there anything else you'd like to consider? To Sarah's point, trying to get everything on the list and get a sense of where the council's at so we can put this into a cohesive scope of work.
Okay, Councilmember Neese and then Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Would it be helpful if we had Sarah stop screen sharing for this discussion?
I think this map is fine.
Okay.
I wanted to make the point that these are unique times, and town transit and public transit in general is not operating anywhere near the capacity that it was prior to the pandemic. The area north of town center, the North Mercer Way area, is mostly a parking exclusionary zone. The permit parking is really intended for people that are residents in that area to park their cars in front of their houses. I feel like, given the times that we're in, that this is not the time to study that unless there is, a really specific rationale related to maybe other goings on. But to me, whatever we did right now would not be a true reflection of normalcy anyway. And I feel the same thing about the south end of town center. I would normally be chomping at the bit to try and do some analysis around the thrift shop and how that's affecting the south end of town center. But having that shut down, I feel, is going to create a false picture down the road for future councils that may not recognize the unique times that we're in, and that the parking activity related to thrift shop right now is non-existent. And it probably isn't a good reflection of the traffic planning and parking that needs to be considered at that site going forward. So my focus is really on town center. What can we do to make the on-street parking, which is, I guess, sitting at about 7.25% of the total capacity within town center, better utilized, more available, more focused on retail, and maybe even expanded. So that would be my focus.
Councilmember Neese, may I throw a follow-up question your way? I should have been a little more specific in my comments. The area north of town center where we have permit parking, we had understood, and I do recommend that we take a look at the permit parking program itself, the fees that we're charging, administration of that program. So would you support including that? Because we want to look at the whole permit parking program as one. I wasn't implying that we would change the permit approach to that area north of town center.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind the economies of scale combining it with this project. I would want to, of course, look at funding sources and if that had any ties back to Sound Transit settlement and Sound Transit settlement dollars, and maybe even the TIP. But yeah, in terms of town center, I would like a discrete pot of work that's related to what we're trying to do, solving the retail problem.
Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Yeah, so with that said, though, I'd like to reserve the opportunity to come back and revisit the scope. So my question is, we're going to have a chance to do a second take at this study after we're laser focused on the town center and specifically the moratorium. So is this a one and done? Because if that's the case, I'd like to go broader and look at the impacts if we change town center parking, because I think the neighborhoods will be impacted. So if this is a short-term, really quick, discrete study that we can then expand on later, I'd be in favor of that. Otherwise, if this is a parking study we're going to hang on to and look back on for the next 3 to 5 years as we come out of the pandemic and traffic picks up and people go back to work, I'd like to make sure our neighborhoods aren't impacted by whatever changes or optimizations we do in the town center, certainly with more retail hopefully coming back online. We need people to be able to get to our stores and restaurants.
I would say, and Jason or Jeff or Ed, if you want to jump in here, I would say, Deputy Mayor Weicker, it depends. I can tell you the staff weren't contemplating doing this in parts. You know, we anticipated doing this parking study now as comprehensively as we need it to be to survive over the next 7-10 years, or until something else significantly changes to warrant another look. So I would just suggest, for the efficiency of our work, that I get feedback, you know, from the council on what needs to be in this scope now, with the understanding we may not do it again for a little while.
All right, then I'd like to advocate for going bigger and looking at the impact of the neighborhoods.
Okay, Councilmember Jacobson.
Would I be correct in assuming that in the north of the freeway area identified in yellow and black, the impact of that is largely related to use of mass transit for parking?
Yeah, the area north of town center, Councilmember Jacobson, is that parking, those parking restrictions, I think Councilmember Neese just said exclusionary, however you phrased it, Saleem, I apologize. That is all related to prevent overflow from the park and ride. So commuters parking there when the park and ride would fill. And then permits are issued for residents that live in that area so that they can still park on the street.
Okay. You know, my sense is that were we to consider doing something differently, we would have a rebellion on our hands, as I suspect that we can't predict at this point what the impact of mass transit is going to be, particularly with multiple changes of means of mass transit, which appear to be in prospect, and on and on and on. So, you know, I'm not so sure it needs to be studied, other than to be sure that we protect those neighborhoods from, you know, hordes that Sound Transit wants to visit on us. I have a second question, and that is for Sarah. Sarah, you mentioned that the parking facilities that have come online, there may have been parking facilities that have come online in town center since 2016. And I would be interested in knowing what, in fact, if any, have occurred since that time.
So the one in particular that likely is not included in the inventory numbers that were compiled during the 2016 study is the parking, mixed use parking included with the Hadley building. I believe the Hadley opened, I think, in fall of 2016, and the 2016 study was completed in April. So while that building was under construction already, the consultant at the time did not incorporate unfinished parking structure into their numbers. So that would definitely be something that would be included in a new inventory.
Thank you.
Right. I'll take a turn. Nobody else has their hands raised. I would say that in answer to the question that's on the screen, I am not in favor of going north of the town center except for to include the permit parking as part of the overall analysis of our permit parking program. For reasons stated by Councilmember Neese and Jacobson, I think that obviously it is important to make sure we protect the parking for that neighborhood. But again, I see the value of including those permitted parking spaces in part of our overall study about whether or not we need to make changes or consider changes to permit parking. We have more hands raised. Councilmember Reynolds.
I think I would be inclined to agree with Councilmember Weicker that, you know, if we're taking a bite of the apple, let's take a big bite and do it all at once. So we don't have to circle back on this. But I have a bigger question inspired by something Councilmember Neese said, which I would like to get Sarah's comments on timing of this study and her thoughts about the implications of timing, because it strikes me that this is not normal right now, as we know what we're going through right now. And I'm wondering what validity the data would have for purposes of picking or forecasting future steady state parking needs when we're looking at it in the middle of a pandemic, and whether it might make sense to postpone this at least to the end of the year, if not into next year.
So timing wise, or I think Jesse might have just piped in as well, but timing wise, we are planning on distributing the RFP later this summer. And so we would come online with a consultant in the fall. And I think a lot of the major work, including I think any public process, would happen closer to the end of the year, if not in the beginning of the year. This is a work plan item that I think was scheduled both for 21 and 22. So there's no necessarily specific deadline to complete it. Although, you know, we want to make sure, as Jesse mentioned, that if we're biting off the apple right now, we might as well do it in the right way. And maybe Jesse can chime in more too.
Yeah, well, I will just advise caution about delaying the study. I feel that we're already a little bit behind, given that the Sound Transit Light Rail Station is going to open in 2023. Rumor is it may even be a little bit ahead of schedule. So council, you know, your direction to me was to commission a study to look at how we are going to mitigate the impacts of that station opening and what would potentially be, you know, commuter parkers. I tell you, I'm having trouble with my words tonight. Commuters parking in, you know, private parking lots, on-street parking that's intended for commercial and retail use. And so I would really have a concern if we delayed this, that I would not be able to deliver your end products in time for us to, you know, change ordinances and change parking areas in time for that station opening. So that's my caution. Other components of this could certainly be phased, but that's why we're here tonight to hear from all of you. So Councilmember Reynolds, that's just, you know, my position on, you know, shortening the runway too much and we're gonna have trouble delivering.
Helpful background, thank you. I'm somewhat reassured by the fact we won't be starting until the real counting, as I understand it, until late in the fall, which is encouraging.
Great, thank you. Hey, we have a number of questions that are going to be posed by Sarah. And so in order to keep this moving and without getting off track, if the next comments or questions are pertaining to this particular question about the geographic area, that'd be great if you could focus on that. Councilmember Androl.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say that I think I could kind of land where you do, Mayor and Councilmember Neese and Jacobson, which is let's focus on town center. I don't see necessarily a reason to look at south of town center. I do think it would be relevant to include the north of town center for purposes of, you know, making sure that permit parking was considered holistically. And yeah, I would not be in favor of delaying the study either. So that's where I am at.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Neese.
I just wanted to ask the clarifying question that, so obviously you know how I feel about the area around the thrift shop. If it's closed, I don't know what we're measuring other than the activities that exclude it. For the area north of town center, north of North Mercer Way, could you not get an idea of what's going on there just by using the ALPR technology in the patrol vehicles and doing targeted parking enforcement? Wouldn't that give you a pretty good idea of whether an exclusionary zone is having a compliance problem or not?
Yeah, let me take one more run at that area north of town center because I don't think I explained it correctly. As we look at the permit program, including the fees we're charging for permits and how they're issued, we want to make sure that that zone, which is different from all of our other permit areas, is included in the program analysis. So we charge a ridiculously low fee right now for issuing those permits, and council, you need to be able to make an informed policy decision about whether or not that's the right fee. You want to try to move to something that's closer to cost recovery. So that will be part of the permit program analysis that's part of this study. I want to keep that in. We're not looking at, necessarily doing a deep dive into current traffic patterns or any of that, parking patterns. It was really just to look at the permits, that programmatic side.
Okay, so you didn't rule it out totally, but the reason I'm going to clarify this is we were criticized on the last parking study, not something I did or you did, right? A prior council did it, that it was done on the wrong day of the week and the wrong day of the time of the day. I don't want to put any resources to an area to study who's parked where if those same resources could be used to get the day correct, the time correct, maybe even do a complete 24-hour type census. So if you're going to assure me that what happens north of North Mercer Way is not studying who's parked there and when, and that those resources would be reserved for what's going on in town center, then I don't have a problem with a rate study per se.
Well, with my city manager hat on, I will say that was not where I was going to recommend you go with that area north of town center. Now, if the majority of the council says, please go study how the parking pattern is happening north of town center, we'll add it in. But that wasn't the intent. So
yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't support any parking there anyway. It's, to me, it's really, it's not the area of focus for me, but
Councilmember Neese, would you support just reviewing north of North Mercer Way, the permit process or the review of the permit?
I don't want to study anything north of North Mercer Way.
Okay.
I think all we can do is look at cost recovery in general from the permit program, but I don't want to get anybody over there excited that I have any interest in parking there at all.
Okay. Any other comments? Well, Councilmember Reynolds, her hand is up. Is that an old hand? Old hand. So city manager, I did hear three people who sort of expressed a willingness to study the parking. Well, actually, I guess if you count Deputy Mayor Weicker, who wanted the broader approach, and Councilmember Reynolds, there may be support for reviewing the permits that are provided north of North Mercer Way, and also then reviewing town center. Does that give you enough direction on this particular issue?
So I just want to confirm, and I apologize just for the staff. I'm having some troubles on this end seeing your cameras. So Jason, Jeff, Ed, if you want to jump in at any point, you're going to need to turn your camera on and jump in because I can't see you. I'm not hearing anyone wanting us to do a deep dive parking analysis on the area of north of town center. So speak now or forever hold your peace. But we will roll that into the programmatic, look at the permit program and how we're issuing permits and the fees. So okay, everyone's sort of head nodding yes. Great.
I was in favor of doing it north of town center, but I also recognize I'm in the distinct minority there.
Okay. I am hearing support for the town center core area, and Councilmember Neese, we're writing notes as you were speaking. You're making great points about daytime analysis so that we're not picking up Sunday morning. And then I did not hear that we have four more supportive of going beyond the town center boundaries at this time.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, Sarah, you want to go to the next question?
All right. Okay, so we've touched on parking supply a little bit already. As I mentioned, the 2016 study did an on-street and off-street inventory of parking available to the public. This map that you have on the right, again, shows the various types of parking currently available in town center. It includes commercial parking, so like surface parking lots that are privately owned but available for public use. This also shows some condo and apartment parking, which is generally for multifamily, not necessarily mixed use. It shows the mixed use parking. So a couple of key questions about supply, and we've been touching on this a little bit. I think Councilmember Neese, you mentioned being interested in on-street parking and maybe ways to expand the supply if that's a possibility. But I'd like to hear from everyone, are you interested in conducting an updated inventory? So essentially a count of parking, both for on-street and off-street non-residential.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Well, I noticed from this color coding, I believe, what I could see here and see in the packet, you have things like the farmers indicated as commercial parking. That's not going to be at all available to the general public unless something changes. And then you've got certain places like QFC, Walgreens, and some other places which are intended, I think, by the owners or occupiers of those properties for the exclusive use of their patrons. And so any inventory has to be pretty carefully segmented in order not to lead to some false conclusions about available parking. For example, I would not consider metropolitan markets is available parking for anything other than metropolitan market people. Customers, I should say, and likewise Walgreens. And unless you make that segmentation, I think you're going to end up with numbers that appear to be wonderful, but in reality are not.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese.
So as I read the Burke and the KPG studies, which were done obviously by two different firms at two different times, one studied on-street parking, the other seemed to study mostly off-street parking, although they crossed over in some of their conclusions. It struck me that, you know, doing those separately, two different firms at two different times, it didn't give us, one study said we need less of the on-site parking and more, and the on-street parking said we have a limited amount of capacity of on-street parking, so we need to increase the supply of on-street parking. It didn't seem that these two studies being done separate was driving a logical conclusion other than let developers put in less parking and the city should put in more parking, which is far from the reality. When you gave the counts, 7% is the city and 93% is private. So I think you got to do the two together. And I think we got to understand how private enterprise should be sequestering their related parking, so that, you know, we have on-street parking available for the excess, the surge capacity, the handicap parking, the people in need, the people that want or desire to have that type of parking over structured parking or underground parking. And then we do have the walk-off parking, and I do want to know how well is the walk-off parking used, how much capacity is there, so that we know if we could have effective signage updates that would direct people to that parking, and if that would alleviate any of the parking issues. So I do think the two need to be looked at together, but I just don't want one study saying we should have less on-site parking and another different study saying we need more on-street parking, because it just doesn't lead to any outcome that is actionable.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else's hand up, but I will, actually I don't know, Councilmember Jacobson, is that a new hand, old hand?
New hand. And
But before you ask your question, I'm going to just chime in here. So, you know, number one, I'm going to support obviously a updated inventory, given the dates that these other inventories were done. But to Councilmember Jacobson's point, I think when the inventory is done, it's got to be nuanced a lot a lot differently than simply counting commercial spaces and residential spaces. Again, to his point regarding, excuse me, the metropolitan market, and obviously now farmers, all those spaces are pretty much gone in terms of commercial space. And also, I think for the purposes of any kind of study going forward, you almost have to assume that the Xinhua project is going forward. So that takes away more commercial spaces as well, or at least puts some restrictions. So I think the bottom line is that whoever does the inventory update is going to have to really identify those commercial spaces as they define them that are really open to the public, as opposed to restricted for particular patrons of a particular company. So I think that's something that needs to be done. But I'm certainly, I think we definitely need an updated inventory. Councilmember Jacobson.
Yeah, count them all but carefully segment what you've counted.
Councilmember Nice.
I wanted to just raise the issue of how they, I think, counted some of the capacity numbers on 77th, maybe other streets. They took a Seattle measurement of how much an average car would take in a parking, and then they applied it to the measurements on the street. I wanted staff to at least have the discussion if there's a better way of measuring the capacity of the street, the available street parking, that would be more based on what do they see parked, like observed parked capacity. So if you have, a street that is parked up, I would hate the capacity to be measured in some sort of ratio of linear feet to curb when you could just count fully parked up curbs, as you see pretty much on 80th. So I just want to add that as a note, maybe to ask the consultants as to alternate methodologies for getting an accurate capacity number.
Thank you. Anybody else with comments regarding parking supply issues? Seeing none, Sarah, why don't you go to the next one? City manager, do you have enough guidance here on this inventory issue?
Yeah, it sounds like we have concurrence. I suppose if we don't, then I'd like to hear from a council member now before we move on.
Yeah.
Going once? Okay.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, and now on to parking usage, which I think can kind of touch on some of the comments that you all were raising in the supply conversation. So some of the key questions that we may consider within this: what are the trends currently of parking usage in town center? Who is using town center parking? Past studies didn't necessarily look too deeply into user groups, so segmenting residents versus employees, off island versus on island. So that's something we may tackle in this if there's interest. Additionally, how does demand maybe vary by location? Different areas of the town center, different specific shopping districts and that, or shopping centers. And then what is the future demand? I know that several concerns were raised about timing of this study, knowing that we are kind of coming out of an unprecedented global situation. So would the future demand be accurately forecasted? But I do think that is something that we could discuss with the consultant and figure out the best methodologies to ensure that we're forecasting correctly, despite this sort of strange year and a half we've been having. So with that, who has concerns about parking usage? What do you want to know?
I'm sorry, everybody's hands are moving so quickly here. So Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, just one of the things I'd be very curious to know is to what extent residents of the town center area are using the streets for overnight parking or other long-term parking rather than parking in their building. So if there's a way to measure that, I'd be very interested to know. And I think it's probably safe to assume naively that if anybody is parked on the street overnight, it's probably a resident, because I can't imagine a non-resident would go into town center to park, but maybe those who know more about this than me will say otherwise.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Weicker, I'm sorry. Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Yeah, so I'll say I'm most interested in this demand for future parking. So given what we're thinking about with retail and new development and light rail coming, what does this whole mix look like? And what are the most optimal ways to maybe change right-of-way parking where we have the most control?
Okay. Councilmember Andro.
Yeah, I think the more information we can get on parking usage and the more granular it can be, the more it will accurately inform our decisions. And I'm interested in the same thing that Councilmember Reynolds is interested in. I'm interested in, off island versus on island versus town center residents versus, all of those components. I don't want to inflate the study into something bigger than it needs to be, but I think this is perhaps some of the most important information we're going to get out of it. So I want parking usage. I want to know it all.
Thank you. Councilmember Neese.
So I agree with all of that, and I'm not going to say that again. But one of the questions that I'd like to know the answer to is, my understanding is all the multifamily in town center charges something for somebody to park a car if they're a resident there. If it's $150, $200, $250 a month, they all have some sort of fee. There is a hypothesis that in lieu of a resident paying that extra money, that they would utilize on-street parking. I would like this study to confirm whether that hypothesis is true or not. And then the second part is I'd like a recommendation to know what must we do in terms of a permit fee or a parking regulation to change that behavior so that people would rather park their car in the residence in which they are a resident as opposed to on the street. But recognizing that if they really wanted to, and they want to pay us enough money, that there must be an amount of money where that becomes okay. And there must be some constraints on what that permit would provide. I would love to know the answer to that question.
Thank you. Councilmember Jacobson.
And one place to get that data, or one approach to that data that you just mentioned, Salim, would be to talk to the property owners. For example, my understanding from having talked to a couple of multifamily places that the number of spaces they've rented is well below the number of residents they have, although they suspect that doesn't reflect automobile ownership. It simply reflects a decision to save money. So that there would be that's a ready place to start getting that data. And sometimes consultants aren't familiar enough to know that. So I would hope staff could make the connections for them to get that information.
Okay. Sarah, I know, I'll ask a question. At some point, are we going to talk about enforcement of these parking regulations? Is that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So Councilmember Andro, your hand is up. Is that an old hand? Oh.
Old hand.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, I didn't hear anybody saying no to having the scope of the study dealing with parking usage. If people are opposed to this inclusion, say so now. Okay. City Manager, I think you have the go-ahead to include parking usage in the study. Okay. Sarah, go ahead.
Okay, two more slides with some specific questions, and then we will wrap it up. So next on the list is parking regulations. There's two primary code chapters that would be relevant to this study. 1074 addresses the permit parking program, and then Chapter 19 looks at parking requirements for town center development. So in 2016, the consultant did do a code audit, which examined the regulations in both code chapters and it also compared Mercer Island code to neighboring communities. So in terms of regulations, certain kind of based on what I'm hearing, there's interest in looking at the code and maybe gathering some recommendations. But just for the sake of this conversation, are you interested in conducting a code audit as part of the new study? I see some thumbs up. Is there any more discussion around that, specific deliverables you want to see?
Councilmember Neese.
Well, I definitely want a review of code of chapter 19. The challenges that we've seen with the code and offering a range to the code official without any sort of nexus for why it would be at one end of the range or the other end of the range is completely unactionable. I think it puts staff in a really poor position. So I think I'd love to hear recommendations on how we either ditch the range or provide some sort of guidance so the code official would know when to offer one end of the range versus another.
Okay. Councilmember Jacobson.
I'm skeptical about comparisons that are made with other places, absent some determination that relevant similarities exist. I noticed in one of these studies, they were talking about Bellevue and Kirkland and Edmonds, I think, and I'm not sure any of those cities are comparable, let alone have, as we're going to have, Sound Transit wants it, a entire transit interchange, which changes an equation. So I would be very cautionary about having money spent studying a bunch of other places like Seattle and Bellevue and things that aren't similar to us. And all it gives us is a bunch of useless information and expenditure of money. So I think that part of the scope needs to be carefully defined so that consultants we don't lose contain on consultants, which is frequently a problem.
Okay. Mr. Thomas, your hand is raised.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I just want to jump in here quick. I was going to briefly mention 3 items. Councilmember Neese covered my first item, which was the use of parking ranges. The second item that I would certainly recommend and like to see in a scope of work for this would be some analysis of the shared parking provisions in our code, and whether utilization of those is still appropriate at this point, or if there's any recommendations to do something different with them. And then the third item, just going back to Councilmember Neese's point from a moment ago on the other slide, which was the paid parking in these developments. The inverse of that perhaps could be to look at options for requiring additional parking requirements if a developer or a future owner operator of a building wanted to charge their tenants. So I think there might be a couple of different ways of going at that, and they might be both worth looking at in this study. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take a turn right now and basically echo Mr. Thomas. Had on my checklist. I need to review the shared parking, and basically, and maybe Jeff, I don't know if you can answer this question. I'm just curious whether or not we actually have shared parking right now, and if so, is it really working? Because I question it. And so, do you know if there's any building that is currently using shared parking, and if so, is it working the way that they intend?
Mayor, that's something I would need to roll back through the archives to look at. We're certainly going to do that as part of this effort, and I'd be happy to update the council with those results as we move this forward.
So is there any objection from the rest of the council to include, we'll just sort of take this one at a time, to include shared parking in the study? And if nobody, okay, I see some thumbs up, so let's include that. Nobody has voiced any objection. Is there any objection to taking a look at the parking requirements, or the range of the parking requirements in the multifamily buildings? Okay, I think I'm in favor of that. Any objections to that? Again, this is simply within the scope of the study and for the RFP. So I think that's something to be included. And then, I'm sorry, Jeff, what was the third thing that you raised?
So he had basically said the inverse of what I had suggested,
Oh,
is to talk
oh,
about
right.
basically bundling parking with your rent.
Yeah, I know that this came up, previous councils, and I know in one particular structure where it was identified as a possible issue. So I'd be curious, maybe something that maybe the city attorney has to take a look at, frankly, to see what can be done to impose upon, private owners, the requirement that if they have residential units, and if a person has a car, that they have to rent the space as opposed to opting out and then parking on the street. Okay, so is that something that we want to take a look at? And that's okay. All right, any major objections to that within the scope of the study? Okay, don't see that, okay. Sarah, is there any more? Well, let's go back to this whole idea of the code audit. Is there, Councilmember Andrew?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to say I'm in favor of a code audit, but I'm not, I think I'm not in favor of any sort of an in-depth comparison of the Mercer Island Code to neighboring communities. I think we need to figure out, what we need for our community, and I'm not sure how much a deep dive into code comparison with other cities really gets us anywhere.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I can jump in,
Yes.
I'm hearing a theme there. What I would envision is our consultant would do something like pull out relevant, good working samples for you to take a look at. Of course, you council will need to decide what's most appropriate for the Mercer Island community, but I don't want to completely rule out comparisons. I think they're informative just for our study and as we develop our plan.
Okay. Given those comments, is there a thumbs up in doing this code audit to include a comparison with other local jurisdictions? Councilmember Jacobson, are you, I see your hand is up. So Councilmember Jacobson.
And comparisons are all fine and good, but we need in the scope, if we don't limit a consultant, we're going to get comparisons of whatever they can most easily get their hands on, which may or may not be at all informative of us. And this is where in scoping this is, I think, so very vital that we direct their attention to what we want them to look at. That is to say, communities of our size. There's some unique factors, Sound Transit's major presence being one of them, and other kinds of things that are going to limit the utility of taking a look at Bothell or at Kirkland, as the 16 study did, or at some other places. And the comparisons that I have seen by consultant work done for the city have been of questionable relevance to me, just what little I know about our place or other places. So I think that needs to be very carefully scoped. I'm not against comparisons, but not against just throwing stuff on the wall and see if it sticks is not something we should be paying for.
Councilmember Jacobson, I'm agreeing with you. I just don't want to completely rule out comparisons, as some folks have tools that may be working that we'd be interested in taking a look at, and they may have implemented them for some time, so we'll have some data there. But I hear you, runaway scopes, we definitely want to avoid. Appreciate your feedback.
Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Right. Yeah, I just want to reiterate, we don't need to do a wild audit analysis, but I absolutely want to be able to pick up code that will benefit us. And I will trust Jeff and Jesse to make sure our consultants don't run wild with that. So yeah, if we can pick up some code from somewhere else, let's use it.
Okay. City Manager, I'm detecting that there's probably general consensus, at least 4 or more, in favor of a code audit and also a comparison, subject to concerns about a runaway comp study.
Absolutely. Sarah, is this a good time for me to have Ed turn on his screen and talk a little bit about enforcement?
Yes, so actually the next slide, if we're kind of done talking specifically about code, exploration. The next slide is the last one, talking about parking management in which enforcement is included. So if we're good, we feel good to move on, I will do that. And if Chief Holmes
Well,
can hop
Sarah,
on.
Sarah, before the chief starts, is wayfinding is something that's covered in any of your slides?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
in a future
Right, fine.
slide.
Yep,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. So just really quickly on the topic of parking management, we've already, I think this has been sort of covered in a lot of the conversation already, but just to recap, in talking about the permit parking program, it sounded like there was interest in looking at fee structures or cost recovery models. So I will go ahead and just assume that that's a piece that we're interested in with the permit parking program. There's a possibility of looking at time limits and restrictions, but I do think that kind of the main conversation right now that we haven't totally touched on is your interest in enforcement and what you want to know. So let's go ahead and get to that.
And Chief, are you available?
Yes, I am. I'm not sure if it's best to wait for questions or I'll just do a quick overview intro. With the advent of those ALPRs, we have one dedicated person, our police support officer. That's one of her primary duties is parking enforcement. So right now she does it in a not quite as efficient way as hopefully we will get to. And what I mean by that is if we get the pay by phone system, if that platform gets up and running, we will be able to pretty efficiently and effectively do our parking enforcement. There are 3 vehicles that have the ALPR system on it. So Anna, she's the one, our police support officer, but 2 other patrol cars will also, or actually have that equipment on them. So if we get the timed parking via the mobile app, and I think pay by phone is the most widely used app that I'm aware of, then we can do this pretty efficiently. So that is our intent. I've talked to our patrol officers, our new operations commander, and our union president about some of the issues around parking enforcement. And at least for now, we believe we have the capacity and the ability to do effective enforcement. If we ever get to a point where it's just overwhelming, which I don't think would be the case, but if we were to get to a point where this is becoming very difficult to enforce with any sort of consistency, then we need to have another follow-up conversation on, is there a different way to do this? But I feel pretty confident that we can do this as a police department, the enforcement piece, with enough consistency and regularity to be effective.
Chief, while I've got you here, I know one of the things we talked about is our various permit parking, I'll call them zones. I don't know what we officially call them. They all have different time limits and restrictions. I know we had talked about trying to get some consistency that we could apply town center wide. It certainly makes your job and your officer's job of enforcement easier. Can you elaborate on that? What you're looking for? Because I do think it's relevant to this part of this discussion tonight.
Yeah, we have, if you look at the map, you can see I'd almost characterize it as like a patchwork of different times and, some areas just south of, not New Seasons, the new one there, Metropolitan Market. There's no restrictions there, but a block over to the east, there's restrictions and there's limitations. So all over the town center, it's like I say, a patchwork of different timed parking. And I'm certainly not the expert on what makes the most sense if you're in front of a business. I don't know, is it 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours? I'm the wrong person to say what that should be, but I know there are correct people. The right people are out there that know what the appropriate churn is and turnover for parking. And I think it would be helpful if we had some more consistency with that. Certainly to your point, Jesse, that would be helpful for us.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Neese.
I wanted to ask the chief, is there in your mind a number of hours which is too short to have an enforcement? I know we have some 2-hour parking, and I know that I've heard discussion that 4-hour is a better practice for the minimum amount of hours to regulate parking. Do you have any thoughts on 2 versus 4 versus other brackets?
I think if we get that pay by phone platform up and running, then you could have almost whatever you would want. Now, if it's a very short window, just the enforceability, just by virtue of the amount of frequency it would take to enforce a 30-minute or a 1-hour parking, I mean, it would be much more difficult, just because if you do the math, the number of times and availability we have to be doing that type of enforcement does look different than if it was a 2 or like you had mentioned, a 4-hour parking becomes more simplified as far as being able to manage that. The enforcement piece, if it's every, and I use an extreme example, every 30 minutes, everywhere all over the town center would be really difficult. The opposite would be, 4 or 6 hours becomes easier. But again, I don't know what businesses need. I don't know what that churn is. I think we need some help thinking that through.
The follow-up question I wanted to ask is, you said that if parking enforcement started to become a capacity issue for the patrol, that we'd have to talk about pushing that somewhere else potentially, or looking at another way of doing that. Does the ALPR technology, for instance, north of North Mercer Way, does it have the ability to recognize parking infractions without the patrol person having to stop and issue the infraction? For instance, could this become a source of data for us to understand how big of a compliance problem we have, even if we don't have the capacity to ticket the parking infractions?
Okay, I'm not entirely sure I understood your question.
So on the map that we're looking at on the screen, there's no parking north of North Mercer Way. It's just all red.
Right.
So if ALPR drives by and sees a car parked, can that become a data point for us that says, oh, if we could drive by there every day, there's 5, 10, 15 illegally parked cars. We don't have time to ticket them all, but does the data from the system tell us that they're there and they're causing an infraction?
It does record, and we save it. Off the top of my head, I think we landed on 14 days, a pretty short window. It does save the data that it records. So we could do a look back and see vehicles parked in a no parking zone, if you will. And if we did not have time to address it at the moment, we could, see that, yes, in fact, there were 3 cars parked on this street yesterday. At least when the vehicle drove by, the ALPR drove by, we could say these cars were in this area at this time on these days, because that's when the vehicle with the ALPR drove by.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the chief? I'm going to try to see, but it sounds like there may be general consensus, maybe not, but if you don't think that we should include in the study a review of our time restricted parking to see if it's rational or needs to be changed, raise your hand now. Otherwise, we're probably going to include that as part of the study. Okay, so city manager, I guess, include that as part of the study. I will want to just point out that I'm puzzled, or not puzzled, but chief, the permit parking that's limited to 7 to 9 a.m. This is really right by the Aljoya. I'm just, if you know, where did that come from? I mean, I assume obviously that was intended to, I'm not sure what it's serving, other than, I guess, to provide somebody who's trying to catch the bus, or maybe in the future light rail, from parking there from 7 to 9. But there aren't too many. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I'm trying to remember the conversation that council had a number of years ago when that got implemented. And I think, if my memory serves me correctly, they wanted permit parking on those areas of the roadway and near the QFC as well, I think it is, or that area, to avoid people parking their vehicle there, walking over to the bus stop and catching the bus and leaving their car parked there from 7 in the morning till 5 p.m. when they got back. So it was an effort, if I remember right, to prevent people, commuters, from filling up the town center with their vehicles and then being gone to work in Bellevue or Seattle all day. So you had to get a permit, and you couldn't get a permit, I think, unless you lived here. And the idea was, again, to avoid people using the town center as their parking lot while they went to work.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Neese.
And that is great context. And in addition to that, there was the issue of employees parking on the streets and those filling up commuter stalls or otherwise general parking stalls. And I think it's an important part of any study. We need to know where can employees park, because if you think of like Tabbitt Square, if all the employees parked there, there would be no customer parking. And so it behooves us to deal with that problem by trying to find a legal place for employees to park in town center. It might be a little bit longer of a walk, but if we give them a permit and provide for 8 hours, then there's a parking stall for a customer that's right in front of the store instead of 4 or 5 blocks away. It's a challenge that we need to solve. I recognize it doesn't, it feels like employees should park on the site of their employer, but it's just not going to be possible for every employer to do that. So I'd be interested in looking at that as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Sarah, I guess.
All right. Home stretch. So just really quickly, Mayor, I know you mentioned wayfinding. These are just a couple of areas that have been covered in the past and have also come up in conversation in the community and among staff and council about other areas we could consider: walkability, wayfinding to parking. But is there anything else that, outside of these two that we haven't covered in this conversation yet that you really hope will address in this parking study?
Councilmember Neese.
Well, I just want to raise the issue that the next council in the next, I guess, next year probably will be looking at sign code updates. And so I think it would be very informative for that process to know wayfinding. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What could we be doing better? I'm sure that people don't understand or at least recognize where walk-off parking exists and how to find it and what the rules are related to it. I don't know if it can be done any better, but I'd like to know what we can do better around that kind of wayfinding.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Weicker.
So I kind of recall something a couple of years ago about parallel parking versus angled parking. Is that something that's to be considered later, or is that something that might be of interest for this? Like how we use our public parking?
That is something that could be considered, if there's specific recommendations around lot size and design standards and all of that. Some of that has been covered in past studies. It's possible that it could be covered within the code audit as well, but that is something that we haven't necessarily talked about tonight.
So Deputy Mayor Weicker, are you thinking in terms of angle parking on the street as opposed to
parallel parking, and maybe some streets that are closed opening up to parallel parking or angled parking? And it could be a whole nother too big of a topic, but maybe starting that or getting a little data at the start with this study might be useful as we look at capacity and trying to future-proof this study for whatever next development might be happening. So I'm open to it, but I'm not passionate about it. So I kind of wanted to just put it out there and see what you guys thought.
I will, Councilmember Neese, you have your hands up. I'll recognize you now.
Thanks, Mayor. I thought we had that built in. I had mentioned we need to look at capacity and trying to increase the capacity. I assumed that would include some form of parking along 77th and 80th, hopefully angled parking on one side of the street. I think that we've seen that successfully used across from QFC there, and that people really like those spots because they're always full. So I hope there's a place in this study to look at that.
So we should add it then.
I kind of assumed it was, but yes, great. Thank you for bringing it up. We should definitely add it in my view.
I would support including that as well. And so unless we have any objections, obviously in the scope of the study, the consultant should look at the viability of angle parking. And obviously there aren't probably limited areas where that could even be considered, but that's something to take a look at. Okay. Anything else, Council?
I'm just going to quickly throw this in. There's 2 angled parking spots that are across from QFC that are reserved for emergency vehicles. 7%, 7.25% is not a lot of the parking in town center. I don't know what the nexus was for reserving those the way they were, but I think it would behoove us to look at, do they still get used? Are they necessary? You know, could they be better used? It's 2 parking stalls in a highly parked strip.
Okay. So city manager, you're going to capture that. I think that's fine. There's also one thing that Councilmember Neese brought up that I think should be included in the study. I don't know if that was also captured, and that is in doing the inventory of spaces, it would be interesting to know what employers tell their employees where to park. So if there's any dedicated employee parking, and if not, then what do they tell them? So if you can capture that information, that'd be kind of interesting. Okay. So Sarah, this is your last slide?
Yep, this is the last major slide of different areas to consider. I do have 2 more questions. I think one of them we've already essentially covered throughout this conversation, but I will pop over to it quickly. In terms of deliverables, is there anything specific that hasn't been mentioned? We've talked about recommendations for capacity building, it sounds like, a deep look at different usage, recommendations for code improvements or updates. So I feel like we've captured pretty well in our notes what you hope to kind of achieve or receive at the end of this, but is there anything major that we want to make sure before we move on quickly to talk about community engagement?
Okay, Councilmember Jacobson and then Councilmember Neese.
I would suggest that we at least have an opportunity as a council and community to take a look at a preliminary report of a consultant here. So if any course corrections are needed, we do them while we're still within this, financial scope of our agreement.
Okay. I'm sorry, Councilmember Neese.
You know, I don't know if there's going to be I assume that we'll have a touch point on this before an RFP is granted, but I'd be really interested to hear the RFP respondents talk about when they will take the measurements and what type of frequency they will take them and how they will take them. You know, if they'll use ALPR type technology, or is it going to be people out with clickers and counting the cars manually? I keep going back to the last parking study and the criticism that council took at that time for the windows in which they measured it. I hope there's a way to do a 24-hour census. I hope there's a way to do multiple 24-hour census, so we don't get put in a box of, if you'd done it just 1 hour earlier, or if you'd done it just 1 hour later, the result would have been different. If we can find a way cost effectively to work in a 24-hour type measurement where they look at it every single hour for 24 hours, then we have a pretty good idea of what the pattern is doing.
Okay.
I think Councilmember Neese, just for the staff team, one of the things we can do with the RFP, we've been talking about the scope tonight, but we can actually pose those questions and ask potential respondents to address that in their proposal. So we can identify some of those concerns and get an initial look at how they would approach that. So thank you for raising that. It's a great suggestion.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Weicker.
I guess I'd like to make sure we're really clear about the questions we're trying to get answered and the problems we're trying to solve. So is it to activate our town center and make our businesses accessible to visitors, or is it to give our islanders opportunity to access light rail because the park and ride might be full, or is it to do this residential enforcement for these multifamily buildings where they might not be providing enough free parking to the residents? So I've heard 3 different themes tonight, and is this parking study going to address all of that, prioritize one over the other? Could we just be clear in how it's presented, what it is we're trying to achieve with the study and the work that we're doing here, especially since we're looking at the next 7 to 10 years?
I think that is a great approach, Deputy Mayor, and I do think from a prioritization standpoint, if anyone feels strongly to weigh that now, so we know.
So I'll start with activating our town center. I think we want to make sure our small businesses have customers and it's easy for them to get to work. I've heard many of them talk about underground parking not being readily accessible for their customers that want to be able to walk off the street and into the businesses, right? Especially if they have kids or physical mobility issues. And then I think this parking issue for islanders to be able to access park and ride, if that park and ride is full, how are they going to get to light rail? So for me, it's activating our town center, access to light rail for our residents, and then sort of figuring out what is going on with multifamily parking capacity.
I'll just jump in and say I echo that 100%. There's a yin and a yang here. I think we're not going to know the answers as to how to prioritize those things because we're going to eventually hit a capacity, where we'd like to do all those things, but there just isn't enough parking stalls to let every resident park for free on the street and have commuter parking and available retail parking. But I think that at the end of it, my emphasis is retail and Mercer and commuter where it makes sense. I think that employee parking is a really important part of the puzzle to solve. And I think multifamily is going to be the answer to that. I don't know what the data is going to show, so I won't try and get ahead of it.
Any other comments? I'll just quickly echo that I support the priorities that Deputy Mayor Weicker laid out. I think that is probably the right priority setting. And so I guess Sarah and the rest of the staff, as you guys do the RFP and lay it all out for prospective respondents, then I guess you just really do need to emphasize the priorities that the council seems to have, unless I see anybody raise their hand to object at this point. The other thing that has been raised a couple of times just now, simply, are we going to be able to, is the council, and this I guess is addressed to Jesse, to the city manager, is the council going to have a chance to see the RFP, or what is the process at this point?
Yeah, why don't we're getting to that side. So there's one more question and then we'll get to the next step side, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. So we're almost to that point. Just really quickly, I'd like to hear thoughts about community engagement for this study. We've talked about a variety of different angles. What do businesses think about the parking issue? What do residents who want to access town center think about parking? How does it impact employees? So I'd love to hear from each of you if you have very strong feelings about public process for this, how you hope we engage the community in this conversation. I'd love to hear that now.
Okay, Councilmember Neese.
Well, for me, this is critical. As I said earlier, we're going to get data that's going to support a number of decisions that we could make, but we're going to have to prioritize which solutions we put at the top. And if we don't know how much the public values, on-street retail parking versus commuter parking versus employee parking, which might free up, off-street retail parking, we're not going to know how to prioritize those solutions. So to me, it's really important to understand this. And I think that, there's a lot of confusion out there as to what problems are yet to be solved and what we could solve. And this is really going to be what unravels that, I think, for me.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Weicker.
I would just say early, often, and ongoing, so as much as possible.
Okay, Councilmember Jacobson.
I don't know what the future plans are for our communications manager, but having read his qualifications and everything, this seems to me to be an area in which we could lean some on his expertise. And I don't know if that suggestion is congruent with what the city manager's vision for our communications person is or not. But we have more resources than we've had in the past to do this. My point.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any objections from other council member or from any council member to having, folding in a robust community engagement process in this study. I don't see anybody raising their hand, so Sarah and City Manager, I would say incorporate some sort of robust community engagement process.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, here we are. So in terms of next steps, there's no other questions or comments. We'll close out here. So from this discussion tonight, thank you so much for such great feedback. I think it's been very helpful. We're going to incorporate the feedback into a draft scope of work, and then we will bring that back to council either in June or July. Then we'll issue the request for proposals in July and August, and ultimately, again, we had mentioned this earlier, but the final scope of work will really inform the project phasing and the timing, as well as the project budget. We have $80,000 currently budgeted for this project. Once we go out to bid with your desired project scope, we may need to return for an additional appropriation, but there will be another opportunity to review that scope in the coming months before we actually take it out to bid. So I will stop sharing now, and if you all have any final questions or comments for me or for anyone else who's been involved in the conversation tonight from staff, please speak now.
Thank you. I see two hands still raised. Mayor Weicker, is that old hand?
No. I just want to say thank you very much, Sarah, for your hard work in queuing this up and shepherding it through the process. So thank you. Well done.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese.
Yeah, I'll echo that too. But Mayor, I wanted to maybe offer a friendly amendment to your request about a robust public engagement process. Do you think that we could get maybe some options all the way from discrete to robust, just so that we don't put an RFP out there that is just has one big option for public engagement and no other option?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, City Manager.
Yeah, what we really wanted to ask tonight is what are the specifics? What does community engagement look like to you on this project? Each project, always, has its own flavor, looks a little different. So there was something really specific that you wanted to make sure we included. We wanted to make sure we caught that tonight. Councilmember Neese, once a consultant is hired, we typically scope the engagement with them. That's not something that we prescribe in an RFP. We're looking, for their ideas. They do this type of work far more than we do, and we'll have a better sense. And it looks to me there's a community engagement piece, truly, talking to the businesses, our residents and others. There's also a huge data collection potential piece here that all needs to be interwoven.
Yeah, and what I was thinking is that you have kind of discrete data blocks. We have everybody that used to have a commuter permit that presumably used on-street parking for commuting. They're probably going to have a pretty good perspective on commuter parking. I'm not sure I want to go walking around just asking random people about commuter parking when we have that type of data. But then again, the employees are going to be another segment that we probably need to talk to. So to me, they're kind of discrete chunks, and they'll come together in some sort of informed public engagement.
Well, we had already signed you up for the walk around and talk to random people part of the community engagement process. So
I'm vaccinated, so I'll do that. That'd be great.
When I mentioned robust, I mean, it's simply that obviously to recognize that we need to have a community engagement process. I'm going to leave it to staff and to the consultant to sort of frame that in greater detail or whatever. But obviously we do need to have public engaged, because there's going to be winners and losers probably in this as a result of the study. So Councilmember Jacobson.
I would suggest we look at some of our recent outreaches, and one I thought was very successful was the one that was done in connection with I believe with the PROS plan. And it was good in attracting a bunch of people who were interested in the subject, and also it was very well moderated, if that's the right word for it, so that the takeaways from that, I think, were clearer than many of the other processes that I've been involved with or observed. So we could certainly take a look at some of the things we've done before and figured out which got us, the best and most the input from the people whose boxes are going to be gored or not gored.
Okay. Thank you. City Manager, do you have enough to move ahead on trying to frame a scope? Okay. Thank you very much, Sarah, and to the rest of the staff for the presentation. So how are we doing? Are we okay? Do we need to take a recess or let's move ahead? Okay, let's move ahead. Let me see what the next item is here. Sorry. I apologize. Oh, I'm sorry. Now we move to the second item of regular business, which is Agenda Bill 5874. This is the first quarter 2021 financial status update and the 2021-2022 budget amendment ordinance number 21-11. And we welcome Matt Warnick, Finance Director, and we also welcome Ben Schumacher, who's the financial analyst. I'll turn this over to Matt.
Hey, very good. Good evening, Council. Matt Warnick, your Finance Director. Just really brief, every quarter the Finance Department pulls together a financial status update that provides a snapshot of how revenues and expenditures are tracking at that point in the year. This is a significant body of work that Ben has been pulling together since he became financial analyst a little over a year ago. So among the other vast and varied ways that Ben supports the city, he is also helping us rethink ways to improve and enhance our financial reporting. So more to come on that front. So with that, I'm pleased to turn it over to our financial analyst, Ben Schumacher, who will walk you through the first quarter financial status report.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, Mr. Mayor and other council members. Go ahead and share my screen here. Give me a thumbs up when you can see my presentation. Perfect. Just going right into it. My name is Ben Schumacher. I'm your financial analyst here at the city. Today we'll be walking you through Agenda Bill 5874, first quarter financial status update, and a new appropriation in the general fund, a new appropriation request in the general fund. Moving right into it. So now I'll go through about 10 slides, should be pretty quick. Just a brief overview of where revenue and expenditure actuals landed at the end of March 2021. And then that one new appropriation request, and it's relating to the police department in the general fund using 2020 year-end surplus. Staff will be available to answer any questions you have at the end of the presentation. Okay, so the first graph you're seeing here is a comparison between 2020 and 2021 actual general fund revenues. The blue lines you see on the graph are 2020 actuals, and the orange bars are 2021 actuals. So as you can see, it's month by month. It's just the first quarter of the year. We actually started the year in January below our 2020 general fund revenues, and then overtook them throughout February and March, and did quite significantly ahead of where we were in 2020. So this table has a little bit of the same information. So that first general fund revenue line is the data that was in the chart on the prior slide. We can gather from this as well, general fund expenditures and utility fund expenditures are down compared to prior year. And then utility fund revenues are just about the same. That less than 1% variance is accounted to seasonality at this time, or seasonality at this time in the year. And that revenue overage can be attributed to a few things. So diving into that, during the quarter, there was a significant permitting payment received in February relating to the Xinhua property in Town Center. The permitting payment was at the beginning of February, and it totaled about $250,000. Sales tax continues to outperform budget estimates as well, mostly due to a strong retail and wholesale trade sector. As a note, our construction and food service sectors are actually down from 2020 totals for the same time, so the first quarter. As well as property tax payments were significantly higher throughout the first quarter of 2021. And this is mostly due to the timing that we receive them. So usually the city receives property tax payments in 2 installments, one in April and one in October. Due to last year and the COVID-19 pandemic, 2020 deadlines were moved back to June. So the city received those property tax payments really throughout April and June. Because there was no extension this year, we started receiving them at the tail end of March. And so it's not so much that we're receiving more revenue, it's just the timing that we are receiving them. Moving on to the general fund appropriation request is an accelerated police hire. So currently in the police department, there are 2 vacant officer positions with 2 more slated to be hired at the beginning of fiscal year 2022. And that was approved in the 2021-2022 biennial budget. What has happened in the recruiting for those 2 vacant officer positions, staff has interviewed 4 exceptional candidates that all exceed the criteria that's desired. This is extremely rare. Usually a recruiting process in the police department only produces about 1 to 2 candidates on average. So staff is really trying to get ahead and jump on the opportunity to hire all 4 candidates at once and fill all 4 current and future vacant positions. To do this, we need a one-time appropriation of $91,245 in the general fund. And like mentioned earlier, that's all coming from the 2020 year-end surplus. What this allows us to do is hire 1 officer about 6 months early and another officer about 4 months early. This will really save us time, resources, save staff time and resources by eliminating another round of recruiting that'll be needed to fill the 2022 positions. So moving to this table, so this actually is not related to the financial status update or this appropriation request, but it is dealing with the other appropriation requests that are before council this evening. So this table is showcasing the street fund, which is, or your street fund, which is Fund 104, and the capital improvement fund, which is Fund 343. The first 2 agenda bills dealing with East Mercer Way emergency road repair and city facility security upgrades were part of your regular were part of your consent calendar, excuse me, and those are already approved. The last 2 agenda bills dealing with Luther Burbank Park Docks and the Mercerdale Park Playground are still before you, and they're coming after this, or they're following this presentation. This just gives council an idea of the ending fund balance numbers that were presented for year end, and then what these projects and how these projects impact those ending fund balances, just in the summary. And finally, told you it'd be quick. Staff just recommends that council adopts ordinance number 2111 as described in Exhibit 2 and amend the 2021-2022 biennial budget. So we'll take questions at this time. I will end my screen share.
Thank you, Ben. Councilmember Jacobson and then Deputy Mayor Weicker.
I'm prepared to make a motion when that's appropriate, Mayor. And I also wanted to ask Chief Holmes if he's still around, if by hiring these officers at this point, do we get ahead in the queue for the academy?
Yes, definitely. They won't take a name. We can't submit just a generic name. We actually have to have extended an unconditional job offer, meaning we not only offer them a job initially, it's a conditional offer, conditioned on 2 things. 1, that they pass a doctor's physical exam, and 2, that they pass a psychological exam. So once those 2 things have happened, then we can get them on a list for the academy. So yes, that greatly helps us get in line for the academy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Weicker.
So Ben, congratulations on your first presentation to council. Well done.
Thank you very much.
And then I wanted to turn it back to Ed and ask him if you want to talk a little bit more about the candidates and the work they're going to be doing, and just thank him for being ahead of the game on this one. So keep going.
Sure. Thank you for that opportunity here. So it's very rare, as you heard, to be able to find 4 qualified, good, strong candidates, especially those that bring a diverse background to the table. And I'm just excited that we have an opportunity here to do just that. So while we wait for them to get in the academy, we can keep them busy learning the exciting policies and procedures of the department, but also they can help with our Marine Patrol in the busy boating season. We can certainly give them meaningful work to do to get them ready. Some of the stuff we would otherwise do after the academy, we can do prior to the academy. And when they can get in the academy, we'll certainly get them in. To Councilmember Jacobson's point, you know, we have to get them on a waiting list. So the sooner we can get their names submitted, the better. But again, it's really rare that we can have this many hires in one round of interviews. We've had rounds of interviews. I know the agenda bill says, you know, typically we get maybe 1 good candidate. There's been a couple times when I've decided not to hire anybody in the pool because, you know, it's probably the most important decision I make is who I bring into this police department in the first place. And so I just need to have as much confidence as I can in these candidates without knowing them very well, but through a thorough background and then the interview. I take that extremely seriously, who I bring in the department. So it is very rare, and at the same time, I'm just very excited to have a diverse mix of candidates who really want to work for Mercer Island Police Department. They want to be part of this community, and I'd love to be able to hire all four, early.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Anderl.
Well, I just wanted to say thanks, Chief, for your work to get these recruits, and for your kind of forward thinkingness to say, look, I know we weren't going to hire this many now, but you got to strike while the iron is hot. So good job. Maybe you can put them on parking enforcement.
I'll think about that.
All right, thanks. I'm very supportive of that. So.
Okay, I don't see anybody else's hand other than Councilmember Jacobson. So I'm going to circle back to him and see if he's still willing to make a motion to suspend the City Council Rules of Procedure 6.3 requiring a second reading for an ordinance.
Yes, I am. I so move.
I'll
Second.
So it's been moved by Councilmember Jacobson to suspend the City Council Rules Procedure 6.3. And I wasn't quite sure who got the second, but I'll give it to Councilmember Reynolds in this case. So City Clerk, please conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderl.
Aye.
Councilmember Neese.
Aye.
Mayor Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye. Sorry, trick by the mute button again.
And Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance number 21-11, amending the 2021-2022 biennial budget?
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Neese to adopt ordinance number 21-11, and it was seconded by
Reynolds.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Actually, I think it was Jacobson. I was tied with Liam on the.
Okay,
moving.
seconded by Councilmember Jacobson. So are there any questions? Hearing none, City Clerk, please conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Mayor Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderl.
Aye.
Councilmember Neese.
Aye.
And Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, motion passes. I'm going to do a city manager. How are we doing as far as time? And we need to take a quick recess.
I think staff are okay. They're all at home, so.
Okay, all right.
It's your
Okay.
pleasure.
Well, if everybody's still good to go, let's move on to the third item, which is Agenda Bill 5868, the Luther Burbank Park Dock and Waterfront Concept Design Recommendation. And for this presentation, we are welcoming Jason Kittner, Chief of Operations, Paul West, CIP Project Manager. And I also understand that Parks and Rec Commissioner Peter Struck is also going to be joining us. So Jason or Paul, I'm not sure who's going to lead the way, but it sounds like.
I'll take that.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, Paul West, CIP Project Manager. I would just like to introduce Commissioner Struck as the chair of the Luther Dock Subcommittee. He served as chair of the subcommittee for 2 months, developing the concept design that you are going to be presented with tonight. And I would like to hand it off to him to make some opening remarks about their recommendation.
Thank you, and good evening, City Council members. My name is Peter Struck, and as Mr. West just mentioned, I was the subcommittee chair for the Luther Burbank Dock project. It's a pleasure this evening to recommend on behalf of the Parks and Recs Commission a concept design for the Luther Burbank Docks and waterfront area as outlined in the agenda bill, including the attachments. I'd like to make a few general comments about the process the commission went through before I hand it back to staff to provide more detail about the concept design. First, you may be wondering why this project is in front of you at this time. The dock structure has less than 5 years of useful life without major renovations, and therefore we need to act now before we potentially lose the opportunity to do something with those docks. So that's why we're here tonight. Regarding the process of the commission, while there was some work done on this project prior to last fall, the process really began in earnest in November 2020 when the commission was able to meet again after what I call the COVID break. Since then, at least 5 of the commission's monthly meetings have had some portion of each meeting devoted to this topic. First, the commission was presented with 3 design alternatives. Then the commission, along with staff and consultants, developed a framework to analyze the 3 designs. And what we did is we took 21 design elements, and they range from things very technical like breakwater effectiveness to non-power versus powerboat capacity at the docks, to group seating on the waterfront versus individual seating, to what type of landscaping, and several other elements. And the full commission then evaluated and prioritized these 21 design elements. To speed the process a bit, the full commission desired to have an ad hoc subcommittee tasked to dive into the details. The subcommittee met a total of 4 times in January and February. And I'd like to thank my fellow commissioners, Lynn Gualtieri and Rory Westberg, who served on that subcommittee with me. As a subcommittee, we developed 4 design principles to help guide us. First, we wanted to protect the quality of the environment. So we thought about things like tree coverage, fish habitat, lighting and noise issues. We also wanted to be mindful of the intensity of use concerns. We wanted to respect the passive open space character of the park as it is today. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't have too many activities in this very small area such that it would potentially become overcrowded. We also wanted to be consistent with the existing master plan for Luther Burbank, as well as other city plans such as the boiler building plan. We wanted to preserve and complement the unique character of this site as well. And finally, it goes without saying that the design needed to be inclusive and ADA compliant. Plus, there were ample opportunities for public engagement along the way, as outlined in the agenda bill materials. In addition, individual commission members had an opportunity to not only physically walk the site and evaluate it, but also engage informally with community members one-on-one about the project. From that work, the subcommittee developed a preferred concept design that was presented to the full commission in early March, which then was further refined by the full commission and finalized in April. And that is the concept that is before you tonight. So in my mind, the concept before you has been through a comprehensive 2-level review track, once at the subcommittee level and then again with the full commission. 2 final comments. First, on funding this infrastructure project. You look at a large number, but I think that it's important to remember that this is a multi-decade lifespan for the project. So when you scale the cost on an annual basis, I think it becomes a quite modest investment. And then finally, regarding the timeline, this is also a multi-year project. And to use a baseball analogy, we're probably at the bottom of the first or top of the second inning with lots of work ahead of us. I believe I can speak for the full commission and say we are ready to stay engaged and move the project forward towards the 30% design phase with your approval tonight. Before I hand the presentation back to staff, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the work of the commission on this project to date. Thank you.
First of all, Commissioner Struck, on behalf of the entire city council, just thank you for your leadership of the subcommittee and all the extra work that you performed along with your Commissioner Westberg and also Gautieri. So, and all the work that the Parks and Rec commissioners do in general, this is over and above. So thank you for all the extra work that you've done. Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Yeah, Peter, thank you so much. This is a lot of work. We really appreciate it. Could you talk a little bit about the concession stand in the boiler room in terms of what do you think the vision is here?
I would say that the there was not a lot of support for a concession stand, and Paul can jump here as well, other than perhaps, you know, maybe like cold drinks and like potato chips or something like that. But there really wasn't a lot of support for you know, having like a full kitchen and, you know, making hamburgers and hot dogs, things like that. You know, there was one thought about, you know, maybe a food truck or something like that could be put in the parking lot, and, you know, for example, boaters could move there, but I think it was not viewed as a high priority, I guess is the best way to put it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Commissioner Struck? There may be others later time. I guess we will go ahead back to the staff at this point.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner Struck, for the introduction. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and give some more details on the concept design. So what I'm going to cover So I'm going to give a little context for the project, talk about the public engagement just a little bit more, and then spend quite a bit of time walking through the site and the design elements, and finally end up discussing a financing strategy that we're proposing. The main context piece for this project is the Luther Burbank Park Master Plan, which was adopted by Council in 2006. It provides the vision for the waterfront, and it focuses on paddlecraft, small boats, and shoreline access while maintaining historical use by power boats. Another piece of context that many people don't understand is that we don't own the land that this project is on. This is DNR shorelands, and we lease those for public access. So the DNR has to approve any changes that we make to these facilities. Staff has been involved with DNR already, and in your packet is a documentation of DNR's review of the concept design. As Commissioner Struck indicated, the existing docks are deteriorating rapidly. The 2020 engineering survey confirmed the original 2014 survey, which is that the docks are going downhill and they have 5 years or less of remaining life. We're going to be doing some short-term repairs this summer to make sure they can last the next 5 years, but really the window is closing. And as Commissioner Struck indicated, derelict docks do not count as overwater coverage. In other words, if we have to close the docks because they're structurally unsound, we have a very limited time before we renovate or replace them. Otherwise, we have to start over and build essentially new docks with no overwater coverage credit. So time is of the essence. And the boiler building is not part of this project, but we're using the design in the 2017 study as context. And phase 1 renovations for the boiler building are in the budget for 2022, pending grant funding from the State Heritage Capital Fund. So your agenda bill details a little bit more of the entire public engagement process, but I would like to just briefly focus on the September 2020 open house because that was the jumping off point for the Parks and Recreation Commission's work. We had a 5-week open house, which was both on site with the posters at the waterfront and also online on our Let's Talk page. And we had a survey and both on paper and an online that received 131 responses. 80% of those respondents were from Mercer Island, 60% considered themselves boaters, and 65% of the respondents said that they felt that the breakwater was either important or very important for the way they would use the docks. 58% of the respondents preferred that we have an expanded North Beach as a feature. And the plaza features that were most preferred were seating, the viewing deck, and landscaping. And as you can imagine, in a survey, we had lots of written responses that had a large range of input. Some people wanted to keep the place the way it is, and others wanted to make it renovated and make it more attractive. Some people expressed the interest in keeping the focus primarily on boating. Others wanted to expand the focus to more to non-boating activities like fishing and sunbathing. The typical kinds of things you might expect. But the comments were rich, and it gave the Parks and Recreation Commission a wealth of opinion to plow through and consider in their design. So this is the design that the Parks and Recreation Commission came up with, and they're recommending tonight in their memo. I'm going to go through it in a little more detail now. And I'm going to break this down into basically the docks and the non-dock components. The docks are obvious, they're the things that extend out over the water. The non-dock components can be broken down into 2 categories. One is the shoreline access components, which are the North Beach and the bulkhead steps, and then the waterfront plaza components. So here's the dock system. And the project for the docks consists of renovating the North Pier. The North Pier is an existing fixed dock, and then installing a breakwater that would be floating and tethered to the bottom of the lake to provide wave attenuation for everything toward the shoreline. This would also be where the small motorboats would moor. And then inside the breakwater would be a non-motorized boat floating dock consisting of an existing float that we already have plus an additional float with some finger piers and or finger docks. And these finger docks provide not only a more secure way of getting in and out of the boat, but they also are our ADA access for kayakers. And similarly, the finger piers on the breakwater also provide the ADA access for boaters getting in and out of power boats. This is a diagram that just shows how the new docks are superimposed on the existing docks. You'll notice that they're in a similar area, but slightly closer to shore. And they represent the same overwater coverage as we currently have. So I'd like to pause there and just take questions about the docks if there are any questions.
Council members, do you have any questions for Mr. West? I don't see any right now, Mr. West. Oh, sorry, even as I spoke. Councilmember Reynolds.
Paul, can you just summarize how many linear feet of dock space is there for small power boats, how much for large power boats, and how much for non-power boats?
I don't have those exactly with me, but you can see the breakwater is 295 feet if you add that all up, and they can moor on both sides of that.
And is that small boat space or?
That's small boats, so that's 26 feet and under.
Okay.
I know the large pier, we're planning on having 6 or 7 larger boat spaces. And then I believe we've measured that we can get about 16 small craft into the non-motorized. And I think it was 22 boats. We calculated we have about 22 boats that could utilize this breakwater for moorage. So 22, 16, and 6 or 7, I'm not.
And the 6 or 7, the large boats, those are going on the pier to the right there? Is that the in gray?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And do you have any sense, what's the wave action there like? Do you think that the outside edge, I guess it's the east edge, is going to be suitable for use for small boats, or are they going to be getting smashed into the pier there from wave action?
The wave action is inconsistent. So most of the time, this is a sheltered location. The wind waves are not significant for the most part here. And the wave action is pretty much from larger boats coming through the East Channel. So I think a boater that is wanting to tie up for more than a short-term visit would want to be on the inside. But I think a short-term, say 15-minute tie up would be appropriate on the outside, given the frequency of, boat wakes that are in there.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Neese.
Great, thank you. Mr. West, I wanted to ask about this aspirational element, the steps to the water. So that area, would it be afforded any protection from the breakwater, or would it be just subject to prevailing wave action of the lake?
It is not protected by the breakwater. It would be subject to wave action.
And that right now is a bulkhead that is just straight down into the water, and the handsome bollards is basically acting as the barrier for people to not walk off the edge?
That's correct.
And in this model, is the chain between each of the handsome bollards, is that left intact and then people go underneath the chain, or what are they thinking about that? Maybe I could answer this in a couple minutes here, because I'm going to be getting to these slides, but. Oh, that's fine. I'm happy to wait.
Yeah, it's coming up in about 5 more slides, so.
Okay, I will wait.
Great.
No other questions. Paul, go ahead.
Okay, great. Great, I'll keep going there. Okay, so I'm going to now move to the shoreline access components of the project, which are 2. One, the bulkhead steps that Councilmember Neese just mentioned, and this one, which is the North Cobble Beach, just off the north end of the plaza. This beach currently exists as a cobble beach, but the main feature is widening it so that kayaks can land there during the high water period of time, which is the May through July peak boating season. So this is a visual image of the beach, and you can see that it's about 5 feet wide at high water. The wider beach would extend back into the hillside a little bit. And the Parks and Rec Commission was very concerned about keeping this natural. So two aspects of that is, one is they want to make sure we preserve trees to the extent possible. The other is to have the ADA ramp down to this beach be made of natural materials as much as possible. So instead of a poured concrete ramp, which would be more typical, this would be a gravel surfaced ramp that maybe is made out of rockery materials or some other kind of natural looking materials, so that it fits with the aesthetic that you see here. Similarly, the seating at the beach would be consisting of logs or some other natural material rather than a bench or something more formal. And this is just another view looking at the bank we would be cutting into, showing that there's a poplar tree and maybe one other tree that could be affected. Part of our 30% design review with the Parks and Rec Commission will be to report on the impact of those trees so that they can make a determination of the value of the design. So now moving to the bulkhead steps, Councilmember Neese was referring to these steps that are right alongside the Hanson bollards. This is an aspirational element that we're including in the concept design. They would start from the outboard edge of the Hanson bollards, which are a city accessioned art piece, and they would go down to somewhere around the high water level to allow people to sit on the steps and maybe get their feet in the water, but not necessarily, or specifically not to, go into the water from. And the thought is that the chain would be removed, in a number, between a number of these bollards, but not between every bollard, because the chain is part of the context of the art piece. So there's a lot of pieces to work out here. One is that we're facing a pretty significant permitting scenario where we're providing overwater coverage to a nearshore environment that's has some significant regulatory aspects to it. Another is that we're impacting an existing accessioned art piece, so we need to confer with the Arts Council on how the two elements interact. But the advantage to the art piece here is that this avoids having to put up a railing outboard of the Hanson bollards, which would detract from the visual impact of the bollards. But currently the bollards do not provide a fall barrier that building code requires. So the steps are a solution to keep the bollards in place. Any questions on those two projects?
No hands are raised. Oh, you got one. I'm sorry. Councilmember.
Can you go back to the map that shows the steam plant?
This shows the steam plant. This here is the steam plant right here.
Sorry, that was great. Just want to understand, you're saying you don't envision that people will be swimming off those steps?
No.
How are we going to stop that? It seems like that would be just an incredibly natural and tempting thing to do, but also it might be a safety hazard with large boats navigating through there. So I'm a little concerned about that aspect.
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate concern, and certainly the Parks and Rec Commission discussed that as well. We have to look at what kind of barrier we might put up there. Is there a railing at the bottom of the steps or some other kind of something to inhibit use of that? There are easier ways to get in the water. For example, the cobble beach is right now is used for water access, and the docks are famous for sunbathing and swimming, even though swimming is clearly prohibited by sign. So we have to look at what is the regulatory framework we're going to put in, both around these steps and around the docks and so forth.
Well, architecturally, it seems lovely from an appearance point of view and a design point of view, but I just encourage you and the commission to think about how to incorporate appropriate safety procedures and precautions in there to protect people from hurting themselves.
Absolutely. I think one of the inhibitions is that the bottom there is not very inviting. And you can't, if you got into the water there, it would be probably difficult to get back out. So
maybe nature will solve the problem for us.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? Nobody's hand is raised, so Paul, go ahead and proceed.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to now talk about the plaza elements, and this is probably one of the most significant ones, which is this ADA accessible path to the plaza. When we did the shoreline restoration in 2008 and 9 to the north of the waterfront, all the way to the dog off leash area, we created a accessible pathway from the parking lot all the way to this point. And at this point, the path becomes too steep for wheelchair access. And so this is the missing link, as we call it, to ADA access to the waterfront. And it's just so exciting to be able to contemplate being able to direct people in wheelchairs to the waterfront finally after, 15 years of being almost there. So that's one piece of the plaza. But I'm gonna actually start showing pictures of the site with working from the north to the south and commenting on some of the plaza elements. So the passageway between the boiler building and the Hanson bollards is somewhat narrow, and the Parks and Rec Commission was concerned about not cluttering up this area with stuff that would limit it, and actually maybe even removing this light post to declutter it. So the idea is to figure out a way to put lighting for safety on the building that will illuminate this passageway, because this is a major thoroughfare for people using the shoreline trail. People walk through here in the early morning and at dusk with their dogs or whatever, and they want to be able to come through. However, the commission emphasized that they did not want to have lighting for programming or nighttime activation of the plaza. So this would be specifically just for wayfinding and safe passage. Similarly, on the clutter issue, the commission didn't want to fill up the waterfront plaza with benches, but historically there was a bench here up against the building, and the commission felt that 1 or 2 benches along the building is a good location for bench seating because it looks out on the water. It gives you a territorial view across to Bellevue. Moving on to the plaza, the plaza would be repaved. It's, as you can see, it's had settling and drainage issues, and it's a patchwork of concrete and pavers and brickwork, asphalt and gravel. It's kind of showing its wear and probably needs a good renovation. And this kiosk, which sits in the middle of it, would be removed in order to declutter that area, provide more open space. A new kiosk would be installed elsewhere. So, and then moving on to the next slide, I'm going to be looking over to the left of this photo to the bathrooms, where the intention is to put a deck and railing on the top of the restrooms for an outdoor classroom. The commission got pretty excited about this idea because what this affords us is a place for boating classes and possibly other recreational classes to take place that won't occupy the main plaza area and therefore clog up and provide and increase the traffic in that plaza area. A class could be located on this outdoor classroom deck, and it's just a deck and railing. The actual furnishings would be removable, like chairs or tents or whatever. Those would be based on the programming needs of that space. The access to that classroom would be a ramp that comes up along the backside of the restrooms, and that would be built into the slope and then suspended on piers as it gets up toward the backside of the building. And that would tie into the plaza and provide ADA access off the plaza surface. And here's the location of a new kiosk that would be where boaters and waterfront users could find program information and regulatory information that is relevant to their interests. This is in direct line with people coming off the dock, so boaters coming to the site for the first time would know where to go to find information, maybe find a map or other park information that they might need. Finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about this corner of the waterfront plaza where there's currently 3 trees planted. These trees were planted when the plaza was built. They're not doing great. They've grown some, but they're showing poor health and signs of decline. The idea is to replace these trees with 1 or 2 trees that could actually gain more stature through providing adequate soil underneath the pavement, and doing so in a way that will prevent the roots from heaving the pavement. So that would be the goal for this area. And then related to the tree, a picnic table would be located to take advantage of the shade of that tree.
Paul, we have a question from Councilmember Jacobson.
Sure.
Well, actually, I have a couple of questions. Number one, to what uses is the boiler building now devoted?
The boiler building is now used as storage, and it's 2 kinds of storage. One is for parks and recreation equipment, and the other is in the summer, the boating programs use it for boat storage. And that is what we expect to continue until such a time as it can be renovated for more extensive boating programs. In other words, right now, when we have boating programs there, the classes have to be convened outside that space because it is not, it does not have a certificate of occupancy for classroom use.
My second question is, what's the square footage footprint of the top of the bathrooms that will turn into classrooms, or be space available for classes at the conclusion of this project?
It's a 40 by about 20, so that's 800 square feet.
Okay. Third question is there any renovation work that the bathrooms need at this stage of their existence?
Yes, so in the project we have included, we're including renovation of the bathrooms to make them ADA accessible.
And finally, a comment. You and the Parks and Rec Commission and the subcommittee are to be commended for the thoroughness and care with which you've undertaken this project and the amount of thought that's gone into it. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderl.
Yeah, I'll echo Jake's compliments on that. It's a very impressive project, and I'm excited to see it start to get underway. My question was also about the classroom that would be on top of the bathrooms. Is that building going to need to be retrofitted in any way then for weight bearing to support that, or have you gotten to the point where you've evaluated whether that would be necessary?
Question. That actually was evaluated during the 2017 feasibility study, and it is actually sufficient for weight bearing as it currently is built.
Great, thank you.
So but they would put a wood deck on top of that, so there'd be sleepers and wood decking on top of that. Probably more to create a usable surface.
Thank you. Councilmember Neese.
Paul, maybe you can remind me, was there something related to the lease that we have with DNR and restricting the activities to just boater type activities? You had mentioned the classroom would be for boating activities. If we did something with the boiler room, that would be for boating activities. Is my recollection correct that we have some restrictions on this facility that they because of the lease have to be just boating activities?
Yeah, there's a subtle thing that exists in our lease where we can have non-boating activities or non-water dependent. They call it non-water dependent activities, and if we have non-water dependent activities, we have to pay for the square footage that we use for those activities. So currently, because the boiler building is not exclusively used for boating, we pay a lease fee every year around $3,000 or $4,000 for the lease of the land that the boiler building sits on. But the restrooms, DNR considers are part of the water dependent usage, and so we don't pay a lease fee for the footprint of the restrooms.
So if we're storing boats in the boiler room and we're teaching classes on top of the restroom, I mean, would that go away? Would we, at that point?
It would be definitely worth renegotiating with DNR if we get our Parks and Recreation junk out of there and make it a real boating facility. I think there could be a good argument for that.
Yeah, as long as it's storing boats. Can you quickly tell us, while we're looking at this picture, what are the signs of decline that you're seeing in these trees specifically?
Yeah, I wish I could show you the canopy. The canopy in two of the trees is actually fairly decent. The two trees on the left, they leaf out okay. This tree right here is in decline, and it's got some poor foliage. It's small foliage and it's sparse. They're just not growing very fast, and I don't think that they're going to last another 50 years. I don't think they're long-term prospects for this site, and I don't think that because they've been suppressed for so long that I mean, in another situation you might do some things to stimulate their growth, but I think they've been stagnant for so long that they might not recover very well if we tried that.
And so when you mentioned that you had a park bench and new trees, and the trees would provide shade for the picnic table, how long would it take until those trees provided shade? Are they going to be of a size that when they go in that they would do that, or it would take 10 years?
10 years, 10 years is pretty typical. One of the things that we hope to do with the tree is to actually use it as part of stormwater treatment. So the stormwater from the surfaces uphill would come through the underground rooting volume, which would help water the tree. It would also filter the water before it goes into the lake. So the tree would actually get more water and probably grow fairly well with that setup if we can pull that off.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at this time? Otherwise, Paul, why don't you go ahead and proceed if you have more slides?
I'm going to try to pick it up here because this is all. Okay, so, oops. So there we go. We went to the questions, and let's go talk about the timeline. If council authorizes us to go forward, we're going to do 30% design starting in second quarter, into second quarter, and going into the fourth quarter of this year. We'll be working with Parks and Rec Commission on that, as well as the Arts Council. In fourth quarter, we're planning to come back to City Council with a 30% design recommendation from the Parks and Recreation Commission. If council gives us the go-ahead at that point, we'll be applying for permits, and then 2022 is the big year, because that's when we apply for all the big grants that this project is hinging on. The grant programs that I'm going to talk about in just a moment only come every other year. So 2022 is the year to apply. If we don't get that window, we have to wait till 2024, which is a little bit too late. And in 2023, we're moving into 90% design and really looking at financing, getting a final project package together, and getting ready to bid and construct in 2024. This kind of timeline is needed because of the complexity of this project and the size of it. As it says in your agenda package, it's could be as much as a $4 to $5 million project. Oops. So our financing strategy is to get to 30% design, which will give us estimate of probable costs, and then we'll really know where we stand with all the project components. And at that point, we'll be able to make some value decisions about what to keep in and what to there'll be another winnowing process at that point. Whatever comes out of that process then gets wrapped into the grant applications, and we have actually good numbers to apply with. Park impact fees could apply to some of the components of this project that are new capacity components, such as the outdoor classroom or the non-motorized docks. We'll probably be tapping the capital improvement fund to some degree. And then the final financing strategy is that 90% will be able to know how to package up this project. In other words, we may need to break it up into phases so that we can afford it in reasonable pieces. And so in that 2024 construction may not be the entire build out of the concept design. It may be a subset of that. And then a future second phase would be planned in an out year. I'm not going to go through this table, but this gives you an idea of the grants that are available. We're already operating under a boating facilities grant to do the design of the docks. We've applied for a boating infrastructure grant for the North Pier renovation, which we should hear about next month. The aquatic lands enhancement and Washington Wildlife and Recreation programs would be grants for the shoreline access and the non-motorized boating facilities. And then finally, we have the King County flood control grant money that we could apply to that, the low impact drainage features and the tree planting that we discussed. The total potential grant funding is about $4 million if you take all this together, with a city commitment of around $2.5 million. We may not need all that, but that's the potential.
Right.
Tonight, we're looking at to complete the 30% design cost, a budget of $155,000. In the current budget, we have $42,000 for 30% design on the docks. The amount we're requesting is $113,000, which pays for the rest of the 30% design on the concept that we forwarded from the Parks and Recreation Commission.
We have some questions, Paul. So,
yeah.
Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Yes, Paul, can you remind me when that PROS plan is scheduled to be done so that we can be eligible for those grants?
I have the answer to that. City Manager Bond?
Yeah. We need to have it adopted, Deputy Mayor Weicker, by the first quarter of next year. And we are currently on track to get there.
Awesome. And then I have a follow-up, but I can wait.
No, go ahead.
So then my other question is the parks levy renewal we're talking about for 2023. So if we wanted to do more and couldn't do it within current potential financial resources, this could potentially be considered for that future levy?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Great. Just want to plant that out there for everybody to think about. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Jacobson.
In a prior slide, Paul, you'd indicated that among the sources of funds were park impact fees. And what is the source of park impact fees, and how much money is in that form of in that account, if any?
I'm going to probably defer this to Jason or Jesse for an answer.
Yeah, and Paul, do you want to stop sharing now?
Yes, please. Thank you.
We'll pop it back on. Thank you. Jason, go ahead if you have that answer. I believe we have 160,000 in impact fees right now.
I believe you're correct with that. And then park impact fees, as you'll see in the next agenda bill, it's something we would evaluate, and it's for new capacity that can be used for it. So certainly applicable here.
Where do they come from?
You've probably heard us use the term growth pays for growth, Jake. So any new new home, new development like Jinghua will pay park impact fees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Neese.
For Paul West, under the grant funding sources, I didn't see WIRA 8. Is there any component that WIRA 8 might apply any grant funding to? Maybe the Cobble Beach?
They are typically looking for things that are pretty much primarily habitat enhancement. The Cobble Beach doesn't quite get there. We are actually getting RIA 8 funding for the shoreline just to the south of the docks currently for habitat restoration. But RIA 8 money is very competitive, and that's tough to get.
Got to go after it.
Okay, our Weicker, your hand is up.
Yes, I forgot to thank Peter Struck and our Parks Commission. I'm so grateful for you guys for doing all this hard work and design work and public input, and staff, thank you for leading the charge, because in previous years, I think this would have been a lot more difficult having the council work on all these details. So thank you for the Parks Commission for doing what we intended them to do and doing it so well.
It's Deputy Mayor Riker, I'll say it's just really made a huge difference to have the Parks and Rec Commission on board, and I just have to say they're doing a lot of heavy lifting still. Thank you, Peter. we've had very full agendas and extra meetings, and it just hasn't stopped. So they're doing great.
All right, thank you. There's no further discussion. Staff has presented us with 3 recommendations. So the first one, I certainly would love to entertain a motion to approve the Luther Burbank Dock and adjacent waterfront concept design recommendation as presented by the Parks and Recreation Commission.
So moved.
Second.
So it's been moved by Councilmember Jacobson, and I heard Councilmember Andral making the second. Any further discussion, any questions? Hearing none, City Clerk, please conduct the roll call vote.
Mayor? Councilmember Rosenbaum?
Aye. I'm sorry, City Clerk, what did you ask?
I was just calling the roll and called for Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Okay.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Wong?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Weicker?
Aye.
Member Neese?
Aye.
Councilmember Andral?
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds?
Aye.
And Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, motion passes. Second recommended action was to approve, is there a motion to appropriate $113,000 from the available fund balance in the capital improvement fund to complete the 30% project design for the adjacent waterfront elements, with the understanding that staff is pursuing grant reimbursement for a portion of the design costs?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Jacobson to appropriate the $113,000, et cetera, and then seconded by Councilmember Neese. Any questions? No further discussion. In that case, City Clerk, will you please conduct the roll call vote?
Councilmember Reynolds?
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson?
Aye.
Councilmember Andral?
Aye.
Mayor Wong?
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Weicker?
Aye.
And Councilmember Neese.
Aye.
Great. Motion passes, and we are at the third motion, which is to direct the Parks and Recreation Commission to review the preliminary 30% design and make a recommendation to the City Council on the final scope of the project. Is there
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Reynolds, and I'm sorry, I didn't catch the second. Is that Councilmember Jacobson?
Yes.
So it's been moved by Councilmember Reynolds and seconded by Councilmember Jacobson. Any further questions? Hearing none. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Councilmember Rosenbaum,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Weicker,
Aye.
Councilmember Neese,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderell,
Aye.
Mayor Wong,
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds,
Aye.
and Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. The motion passes. Just doing a quick reality check here, folks. Do you need a break? City Manager, how are we doing? As you and the staff?
It's your pleasure. Oh, microphone. It's your pleasure, Mr. Mayor.
Well, anytime that occurs, let's take a 5-minute break. How's that? Just a quick 5-minute break. We'll be back at around 9:41, 9:42.
How do I get my video back on?
IT will be able to turn you on in just one moment, council member.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Mayor?
Back, okay. We now move to the next item of regular business, which is Agenda Bill 5876, the Mercerdale Playground Renovation Appropriation Request. And for this presentation, we welcome Chief of Operations, Jason Kittner, and Paul West.
Mayor Long, can I get a thumbs up that you can see my screen? Excellent, thank you. Jason Kittner, your Chief of Operations, and as Mayor Long mentioned, Paul West, our CIP Project Manager, is here to talk about the Mercerdale Park Playground Appropriation. You've had a long evening, lots of discussion this evening, and we have something fun to talk about, so it's exciting. I apologize if the presentation's a little glitchy. There's some fairly large graphics I'm going to show you, so there might be a slight delay, so just bear with me if that's the case. Real quickly, we'll talk about the project need, the overall design process. I will show you some pretty pictures with the recommended design, and then touch on the project budget and appropriation request before the council this evening. The Mercerdale Park Playground, otherwise known as Train Park, was constructed in 2002. It's important to note that many members of your parks maintenance staff are certified playground inspectors, and they routinely inspect this playground and other playgrounds on the island and identify issues of concern. A lot of times these issues are addressed throughout the course of the normal lifespan of the playground. Other times it gets to the point where it gets on a capital reinvestment list, as such is the case with the Mercerdale Park Playground. In this particular case, we had plywood that was delaminating on the actual train feature itself, as well as signs of metal fatigue and degradation. And so, as you all know, part of the playground was actually removed by parks maintenance staff last weekend. The playground project was further expedited because of the subsurface drainage issues. As you can see in the picture here, the decomposing wood material actually plugged our subsurface drainage. And instead of a Mercerdale Park Playground, you had Mercerdale Pond for much of 2020. So between the aging infrastructure and a 20-year lifespan for a playground is pretty consistent in our area and climate, complicated by the drainage issues, this project was identified for replacement. It was identified and included in the 2021-2022 capital reinvestment program, which actually took place last year and adopted by the council in December. And since then, the project began in January. We've had 2 public meetings, been to the Parks Commission twice, and we are here this evening seeking council appropriation for the project to move forward, with the anticipation that construction will begin later this summer, and hopeful that we can get the playground installed while we still have some good summer weather left in us. So just real quickly, we held 2 public meetings, both via the Zoom platform, one in early February where we talked about some initial scoping and solicited public input. A second meeting was held on April 14th, again on the Zoom platform, where it was a webinar based, where we did actual live polling and a robust Q&A session as part of the Zoom presentation. Both meetings had participants that were supportive of a more accessible and inclusive playground, which was a difference than what we originally budgeted the project for. We were originally budgeting a like-for-like replacement within the existing structure and footprint of the Mercerdale Park Playground area. The Parks Commission reviewed they actually reviewed 2 options, 2 preferred options, at their earlier meeting earlier this month and confirmed the preferred concept design, which is included as the recommendation tonight before the council. I think it's important to note that in that first picture I showed you, you saw the concrete structure surrounding the playground itself. We are staying within that existing footprint. That was the idea from the beginning, and we had one design concept that included a slight expansion of that footprint to allow an additional play feature that was accessible and inclusive. But the commission felt fairly strongly that that expansion was not needed to meet the needs of the playground and did not support that expansion and accessible rural play feature. The commission also was pretty vocal in the surfacing graphics and making sure that additional graphics weren't needed on the port in place surfacing. So this is the boring picture. This is the overall site plan. As you can see, the playground structure is within that sort of oval shape of the existing playground area. What you see in this recommended design is a main structure that gets up to 5 feet in platform height that is fully accessible. So there's a series of 5 platforms with an accessible ramp. As you can see on the left-hand side, we are staying true to the railroad theme and have a custom piece being designed for this playground that includes a railroad component. And in the lower right corner, you see some spinning features that we'll talk about in just a second. So let's get to the fun part. And here are some conceptual pictures of what the playground will look like. I'll note a couple things. Again, here's the train. This is a custom piece that will be installed. And the surfacing that is being used for this playground is a mixed surfacing of both synthetic playground grass as well as port-in-place rubber. I think one of the other important elements that we heard from the community and through our public engagement process was that the community preferred a more natural tone or color scheme with the playground itself, with some slight pops of color along the way. And so this is an artist rendering of what it will conceptually look like and the color scheme identified for it. Here's a close-up picture, conceptual of it. And you'll also note one of the other subtle changes that was made is on some of these climbing features to the actual platform decks. You can see sort of this rock color structure here as a climber. We tried to be more consistent with the natural tones and color schemes for those types of features as well. This is the reverse picture of it. Again, you can see some of the graphics, some slight graphics of the train. That's on the actual port-in-place surfacing. Any enhanced graphics, again, were not recommended by the commission. Finally, I will touch on this piece you see on the back right here, and that's called the cone spinner. So the climbable cone spinner is a unique piece to Mercer Island. We do not have this this specific piece of playground equipment in our system currently. This is a playground piece that is very inclusive. It includes multiple types of interactive play, including climbing and spinning. As you can see here, there's actually 2 platforms for kids to climb up in and have their friends spin them round and round. If it was my kids, they'd probably climb to the top and then have one of their brothers or sisters or one of their friends spin them as fast as they can. But this is a unique feature that will be specific to the Mercer Park playground design, is included in the preferred concept. So before the council tonight is a budget and appropriation request. The total project cost for this playground is $843,000. We budgeted $490,000 in the capital improvement plan. The Mercer Island Preschool Association is donating $20,000 towards this project. So the appropriation request before the council tonight is $333,000. As noted previously, park impact fees may be used to fund a portion of it, and staff recommends that the council authorize the max amount of those park impact fees to be applied towards this project. And with that, there are 4 motions before the council this evening. Leave them on the screen, but they're also in your packet. Myself and Paul West are both here to answer any questions that you may have.
Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Yes, super cool and really excited about this project, Jason and Paul. Thank you. And I've been hearing from some folks about the extensiveness of the drainage work that has to be done before you do all this cool stuff. Do you want to take a minute just to talk about that and how expensive it is?
Sure, I can touch on it, and Paul, I'll let you add your technical expertise, but the drainage work is included in this price, in this project budget. It does include removal of the wood structures. The concrete wall that actually divides the playground currently will be removed as part of the scope of work. That actually allows us a larger footprint within that existing outside perimeter structure to get more play features included. And then that subsurface drainage will be repaired and make sure that's free flowing. And the surfacing, there will be some fill that will be brought back in that will be added to the drainage component, but the surfacing itself will also is free flowing and will actually allow for the water to drain as it's needed. Paul, you want to add anything further to that?
I just want to say that the thing that's going to really make the drainage work much better is that it's going to include a added lateral line that will provide much more surface area to pick up water. Right now it's a point drain where it all drains to one point. So these clogging problems that we've had should not be a problem in the future because we'll be picking up water from across the basin.
Great, thank you. Jason or Paul, can I ask a question regarding the surface area? Is that, I know sometimes people are concerned about health issues. Folks looked into this particular, I guess you called it a mixed synthetic surface. And so I'm just curious, what do you know about it in terms of durability, health, any health issues ever raised about it?
I can start on that one. So there's two surfaces. The pour in place rubber surfacing is a EPDM rubber. That's a rubber that's used in pond liners. It's a virgin material. It is not the rubber that comes from recycled tires. That's the thing that there's the major health concerns about. There's no recycled tires in that material at all. There is, for full disclosure, I'll say there is recycled tire material in the underlayment to that pour in place surfacing to create the resilient surfacing, but it will not come in contact with the park users. The EPDM rubber is held together with binders. The binders are like a paint or a varnish that you might use. It has volatile chemicals that you have to wear respirators to put in place. But once the binders are cured, the volatile chemicals are off-gassed and there is no health issue there. Then for the synthetic play grass, same thing. There's no, it's not like the athletic turf that we have in some places on the island where that has the crumb rubber infill. This is a play grass that's designed for playgrounds. The infill is actually a acrylic coated sand. Again, all virgin material, none of it's recycled rubber. And the underlayment to that is a pad, a foam pad. So there's nothing there that I think is of any consequence for health issues.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Jacobson.
I have two questions if I'm permitted. Question number one is, what's the life expectancy for the surface covering material?
I guess I will say that it's not, I don't think it's the full 20 years of the playground in certain spots. Like you can anticipate that in the high wear areas, like at the bottom of a slide or underneath the swings, we're going to experience a lot of wear in those areas, and there will probably have to be patching done maybe 2 or 3 times during the full lifespan of this playground. But we've had very good experience with the pour in place rubber at Luther Burbank Park. Even at the bottom of the slides, it's still in good shape. So we have to just see, and we may not need to patch it. What our vendor tells us is that the grass does have a greater tendency to wear. So we may be patching in a new piece of turf once or twice during the lifespan of this playground and the high wear areas.
I'll also just add that as I referenced earlier, our parks maintenance staff certified playground inspectors, and a lot of times they come across issues and pieces of playgrounds have to be replaced during the normal life of the playground itself. And so surfacing is an important piece that they will be evaluating, and they will address as part of the ongoing O&M for that playground piece throughout its life cycle.
My second question was, I noticed that MIPA has made a donation to this project, and that I think Rotary is considering it. Is the city receptive to additional contributions should people be willing? And if so, where should they be directed?
City is definitely receptive, and MIPA is going to be the fiscal agent for donations for this project. So the MIPA, I think, is going to be putting out contact information for people interested in donations, and then they'll be bundled and transmitted to the city.
And if I'm not mistaken, they're a 501c3, so donations would be tax deductible for the donor.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff regarding this project and the requested appropriation? Deputy Mayor Weicker.
A final thank you to the Preschool Association for being the fiscal agent and raising that money, and John Hammer for his relentless advocacy these past many months.
Yes, I definitely echo that. So unless there's any other questions, we actually have 4 in front of us. And so the first one is a motion to accept the proposed project design for the Mercerdale Park renovation project. So, okay, I didn't even finish the motion. City Clerk, do you have that motion?
Sorry.
I do, Mr.
All right, so you already have it. You have it. Okay. Is there a
Second.
All right, so it's been moved prematurely, but yeah, and then seconded. But
Sorry.
all kidding aside, no, I'm just teasing. No other questions? City Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Mayor, just for the audio record,
Yes.
there was a motion and a second to accept the proposed project design for the Mercerdale Park renovation project and approve the amended project budget of $843,000.
Correct.
Thank you. So Councilmember Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Mayor Wong.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderall.
Aye.
And Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Motion is to accept the $20,000 donation from the Mercer Island Preschool Association and appropriate the donated funds to the Mercerdale Park renovation project and authorize the city manager to direct additional donations to the project.
So moved.
So moved.
So it's been moved by Councilmember Anderall and seconded by Councilmember Reynolds. Any questions?
Rosenbaum had the second on that.
Okay, I will, okay. City Clerk, did you get the second? Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Councilmember Rosenbaum has a second. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Is there any further questions? Okay, hearing none. City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Anderall.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Mayor Wong.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Aye.
And Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Great. The motion passes. Third, is there a motion to direct the city manager to complete the park impact fee funding evaluation for this project and authorize the appropriate maximum amount of eligible park impact fees to this project?
So moved.
So moved.
So it's been moved by Councilmember Jacobson and seconded by Councilmember Reynolds. Any questions? Any further discussion? Hearing none, City Clerk, please conduct the roll call.
Councilmember Andrell,
Aye.
Mayor Wong,
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum,
Aye.
Councilmember Neese,
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson,
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds,
Aye.
and Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. Now we are at our fourth motion is to authorize the remaining project funds to be drawn from the available fund balance in the capital improvement fund. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I hear a second. Okay, so it's been moved by Councilmember Neese and seconded by Councilmember Reynolds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, City Clerk, will you conduct the roll call?
Councilmember Jacobson,
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum,
Aye.
Councilmember Neese,
Aye.
Mayor Wong,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Weicker,
Aye.
Councilmember Andrell,
Aye.
and Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I know it's been a long evening. We are now at the last item of our regular business, which is Agenda Bill 5870, City Council Rules of Procedure Amendment, Resolution number 1597. And to lead this discussion is City Manager Jesse Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Deb. Are you there?
I'm here, Jesse, and ready to bring up the Word document when you're ready.
Great. Well, I'm going to actually have you walk through this. So why don't you go ahead and
I'll go ahead and share my screen now.
So City Council, you may recall at your April 27th planning session, we reviewed your City Council rules of procedure, which we typically do annually. You provided feedback on a number of sections. We have drafted that. What I wanted to do tonight, we're not going to walk through each one, but I do want to address any questions or concerns you might have. So I've had, oops, Deb, you've got your, there we go. I've had Deb pull up the Microsoft Word document. It's a little easier with this document to work from Word than PowerPoint. There was one other change, so I want to jump to really quick that came in after the fact. Deb, do you want to go to that one?
Yes, I'm bringing it up right now.
There we go.
It was easement.
Long plat.
Long plat, thank you. That was the word I'm looking for.
2 words.
Well, it would help if I spelled correctly, wouldn't it? There we go.
So Council, this is my thanks to Dan Thompson for catching this one. On page 11 of your document under quasi-judicial public hearings, we noted the purpose of quasi-judicial public hearings and included a citation for preliminary long plats. Those are actually no longer done by the City Council. Those are completed through a hearing examiner process. So the appropriate action would be to strike that here. And we're recommending we incorporate that change along with the others tonight. Other than that, the material is as presented in your packet. Is there any particular issues you'd like to walk through, questions you have? It's 10 o'clock at night, I do recognize that. Is it helpful to show the screen or not? We can also turn it off.
We have a question from Councilmember Jacobson.
I hate to prolong this 1 second longer than we have to, but we're on page 3, section 1.5, Code of Ethics. With respect to this, is this language going to be correct with what we contemplate the ethics Code of Ethics revision is going to be? Because I believe that the statement is no longer has much standing as previously contemplated.
Jake, do we have the right section on the screen that you're referring to?
Just a minute. Yes.
Section 1.5?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you referencing the where it says statement? Is that the concern, Jake?
Yes, because my recollection, without having looked it up, was that the revisions that were being proposed would eliminate the statement, and there would be a code of ethics with all its appendages. So this, I think, is just language that hangs over from a prior, the way things used to be.
Councilmember Jacobson, it seems like the solution here, and I again will compliment you on the catch, that was a good one, is to strike the words "and statement."
Yes.
And then you have to change
Is.
it is, say are, yeah. Deb, do you want to do a global search to see if the word shows up somewhere else? Probably not.
One moment, my mouse is fighting with me. There we go. A broad statement. And right here. 8.8.
And in this one, aren't the members only going to acknowledge receipt of the code of ethics?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to strike the word statement.
Yeah.
I'll receive the code of statement.
You gotta strike the S there.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Like I
Oh,
said,
sorry. Yeah.
that's okay. My mouse is just,
Well,
there we go.
okay. All right. Any, well, Councilmember Nice.
This isn't quite right yet.
Nope.
We can. The use of acknowledge and acknowledging in the same sentence is awkward.
Oh.
But we can remedy that if council.
This is Chief of Administration. I would just suggest that you strike out acknowledging and then say to understand.
Okay.
Thank you for the rescue, Ally.
Okay. Councilmember Nice.
On 5.2B, I suggest that we just change this, so the city council shall avoid discourteous behavior such as lengthy or inappropriate sidebar discussions or nonverbal disparaging actions when, I would say, during appearances instead of just when people are speaking.
Say that one more time, Councilmember Neese.
The city council shall avoid discourteous behavior such as lengthy or inappropriate sidebar discussions or nonverbal disparaging actions during appearances.
This is Chief of Administration again. I think you could actually just end it after actions, since the statement at the beginning specifies during appearances.
Which is fine, but just recognize that it occurs again in 5.3B, and that has a slightly different ending, which may be okay.
Want to do?
I think 5.3B is okay. I also want, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's, I would agree. I think 5.3B is fine.
I'm a little confused on 5.4. Is 5.4 saying that if we had a motion and the motion was to reduce the speed limit on Elmcrest Way to 10 miles an hour, and if I didn't agree with that, but I decided to vote for it, just so I could then use this provision to, in the same meeting, recall the issue for reconsideration, that would be my prerogative, having voted for it? Like, what is this trying to do?
This section is actually per Robert's Rules of Procedure, if I recall correctly.
That is correct.
So it basically allows for the majority block of the council that voted on an issue to bring the issue back for reconsideration.
It's actually the inverse of that, Councilmember Neese. It prevents members who did not prevail on a vote from recalling it.
But it allows those that did vote to recall it.
Yes, you were in the majority.
Okay, I found it odd, but I guess if it's a Robert's rule, no point in changing it.
Okay. Any other comments? Councilmember Jacobson, your hand is up.
Yes, 3.2, section 3.2A. And this is the pedant in me speaking. On the third line, the word permittable is used. And I don't think that's applicable to what's intended here. It should be permissible. Because we're not,
that's right.
We're not permitting meetings.
Okay.
And I have one other one. And that's on page 8, 3.2E. And it's the word possible. And I'd suggest you substitute the word practicable for possible.
As soon as practical.
Or practicable is the proper word.
Okay.
I have a question on 5.2C. Does 5.2C allow the mayor to recognize the council for this clarification, but not the mayor itself? So could the mayor ask the public commenter a clarifying question? Or only a member of council being asked to be recognized by the mayor?
That's the way I would interpret it. I think in practice, it hasn't happened in a while.
I mean, in practice, I've seen it actually work the other way around where the
Yeah. Well, your mayor is the presiding officer, and would be the person you would look to, so Councilmember Neese, if somebody was speaking and you had a clarifying question, the appropriate thing to do would be to ask the mayor if you may ask a clarifying question. As a presiding officer, we could revise this to make that more clear.
Well, I just know from practice, I've seen not necessarily you, Mr. Mayor, but other mayors be the one that asked the clarifying question. This would preclude that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm actually reading it backwards.
The mayor would have to ask a council
Yeah.
member to ask the clarifying question and then give the permission.
I got it. I actually was reading that differently. Thank you.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the intent is to have the mayor ask the clarifying question of the speaker.
Well, I suppose the mayor can always, this is Bill, city attorney, the mayor can always recognize him or herself to speak as he or she does during the normal course of council business.
I guess as I read this again, this is a restrictive covenant where the council cannot engage in something. It doesn't actually speak to what the mayor, I mean, I guess if the mayor has an overriding ability to conduct the meeting, then that wouldn't be.
Don't we, I would say, isn't there a reference in here that the mayor retains all the same authorities of the city council? I think this might be okay. I had to read it twice, Liam. I read it.
Yeah, I think it's okay.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Jacobson, your hand is up still?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Under 5.2, there's no indication in here about what the length of the public comments are, number one. And number two, there are occasions when people run way over. And if there's a technology that's available to just cut the mic off at 3 minutes, I think that's appropriate. Or at least require the person to say, I have more things to say, may I have leave for another minute or something like that, because people who confine it to 3 minutes are upset when somebody goes longer. And but I think we should, in any event, install a 3-minute rule in our appearances.
There is.
And maybe it's here. I don't see it.
No, it is. It's in, I can figure out. It's on page 13. It says 3.3 G. 3.3 G.
You're looking at 3.3. Okay.
G.
Okay, I didn't see that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments or suggested changes? Otherwise, we do have a motion to consider. Okay, I don't see more hands up. So are we at a now? Yes, I'm sorry. Are we now at a point to consider a motion to approve resolution number 1597, amending the city council rules of procedures fourth in exhibit A, I guess as amended. Okay.
Correct.
All right, so.
So moved.
Folks, you want to stay here all night? I am looking for that second.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councilmember Reynolds and seconded by Councilmember Jacobson to approve resolution 1597. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderall.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds,
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum,
Aye.
and Mayor Wong.
Aye. Thank you, council. It's been a long evening. We have a few more things to do. City Manager Jesse Bond, other business and planning schedule.
Absolutely. City Council, your next meeting is June 1st. I will note for any community members that are still here this evening, the item that we were holding for the town center discussion on June 1st, that's actually going to be moved out. I'm not certain yet if it'll be a June 15th or July 6th, probably July 6th. And I think that was the main change that I wanted to mention. Council, the calendar in your packet does not reflect this, but you may recall August is still intended to potentially be a recess month where we take both meetings off. I will tell you that in terms of coming back in September and having everything buttoned up, we are looking forward to that downtime. We'll see how our work progresses through July and make a final call in July. I also, a little off the planning schedule, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about hybrid council meetings. What we're planning to do, we have a whole sequence of events that are happening through June and July at your July meetings. What we may do is do kind of a practice run with staff sitting here in council chambers in your seats in case something is going wrong. That way your meeting can keep proceeding while we continue to work through the technology. So we are progressing towards your hybrid meeting solution. We have a lot of testing to do on our technology. So continue to plan for September to be back in person if we are in a position to do that.
Thank you. That'll be exciting. Okay, council member absences, none to report. Okay, so now we go to council member reports. Deputy Mayor Weicker.
I'm going to beat Craig to this and just remind y'all that the King County Climate Cities Coalition is meeting June 3rd at 2 o'clock. If you want to hear the latest on the environmental stewardship, invite you to attend. It'll be a cool recap of all the great legislative work and coming attractions in the coming years.
Great. City Council Member Neese.
No reports.
Council Member Androl.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Jacobson.
East Side Transportation Partnership met virtually last Friday, when it largely consisted of state legislators patting themselves on the back for all the wonderful things that they had done regarding transportation, many of which have now been thrown into a cocked hat by the governor's item veto of part of that whole thing. So in any event, nothing worth reporting beyond that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rosenbaum.
I can't top that. Nothing.
Okay, Councilmember.
The deputy mayor stole my thunder, so nothing to report.
And we have just, speaking of workshops for elected officials, you've heard me a couple of times mention the King County Clean Water Plan. So again, that's a long-term planning plan. It could have impacts on utility rates for several years. And the next workshop for elected officials is May 21 from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. So I'd encourage you to sign on if you have the time and learn more about this clean water plan that is potentially coming before the King County Council later this year. The last thing I'll mention is that Councilmember Reynolds and I had the pleasure of attending a groundbreaking ceremony for the renovation of the nationally recognized historic teacher's cottage located at the Sunnybeam School on May 6th. So it was kind of a fun event. It was one of these outdoor events, and the first time Councilmember Reynolds and I saw each other in 15 months, as he pointed that out to me. So anyway, that's all I have. And the meeting is now adjourned. It is 10:27. And again, please remain seated as the staff terminates the broadcast. Good evening and stay safe and healthy.